welcome to the show.
A man is running through a dark forest in Ireland. He seems frightened despite constantly encountering signs with the words "point of no return" and various numbers, indicating either directions or distances to something. However, he fails to escape. Darkness quickly envelops the surroundings, a flock of birds flies overhead, and he falls into a pit. In the next moment, an invisible force grabs him and drags him away. Elsewhere in the country lives an artist named Minna, who works in a pet store. One day, her boss asks her to deliver a rare parrot to a zoo in a neighboring city, and Minna agrees. She takes the bird home for the night. There, she tells the parrot that her mother died 15 years ago. Suddenly, the bird starts to respond. In the evening, Minna puts on a wig and goes to a bar where she introduces herself to a guy with a fictitious name, claiming to be a ballerina. In the morning, Minna apologizes to the parrot for her behavior, saying the real her would probably not be liked. Finally, the pair set off on their journey. On the way, her sister Lucy calls, reminding her that she has family and nieces who love and await her. Minna continues driving and eventually ends up on a road leading into an old dark forest. Unexpectedly, the car breaks down and stalls, and the connection also mysteriously cuts off. Taking the parrot's cage, Minna steps onto the road to seek help, but the forest is dark and empty. When she returns to where she left the car, the road is deserted. Minna continues to wander through the quickly darkening area, talking to the bird to keep herself cheerful and suggesting they name it Darwin. Suddenly, she notices a woman running past and decides to follow her. Minna catches up with her near a small forest cabin, and the woman, opening the door, orders her to come inside quickly if she wants to live. Naturally, Minna rushes into the cabin. The elderly woman is named Madeline. She has been living here for some time with two other young people, Ciara and Daniel. She immediately orders Minna to stand in front of a mirror because the watchers cannot enter inside but observe from outside, coming every night after sunset. Standing by the mirror, Minna suddenly hears sounds like applause. Madeline confirms her suspicions. The watchers are applauding the appearance of a new object. In the morning, Minna announces that she intends to leave. Although the others assure her it's impossible, she heads into the forest. Madeline catches up with her, explaining that the forest causes hallucinations, but it is possible to survive here. The signs scattered throughout the forest mark the boundary from which a person can reach the cabin before dark. But if you go beyond the boundary, there will be no way back. They were made by a man named the Professor, but where he is now, no one knows. That night, Daniel puts on a show for the watchers, presenting them with the newcomer, but they ask her to behave as usual. Meanwhile, Ciara turns on the music and dances, as she does every evening. Minna, on the other hand, finds discs with recordings of Love Search TV shows. In the morning, she and Ciara go to gather medicinal herbs because her missing husband asked the girl to take care of Daniel. Then the man went to search for a way out and disappeared. Ciara explains that recently they found strange burrows scattered throughout the forest. That's where the watchers go during daylight hours. She believes she has been in the cabin for almost 5 months. Later, Madeline announces the safety rules. Never leave at night, never open the doors for anyone, always try to stay in the light. Strange life begins with entirely identical days. Minna watches endless shows and often stands staring into the mirror. One day she knocks on it, and immediately there is a knock on the door. Madeline orders everyone to freeze and everything stops. The next day she and Daniel go hunting. The boy tells her that Madeline used to work at the university, so she considers herself a know-it-all. But she has been living here the longest. Daniel himself has been in the cabin for 8 months, but has never seen anyone. After listening to the boy, Minna convinces Daniel to help her explore a burrow. Using a rope, Minna descends, explores it, and finds old items, newspapers, toys, pieces of electronics, and an old bicycle, which she ties to the rope and sends up. But then strange sounds, similar to those heard at night outside the cabin walls, echo from the darkness. Minna screams and the rope falls at her feet. Climbing out into the light, Minna leaves the dangerous place, and they calmly examine the items. With the bicycle, it might be possible to escape from here, but Madeline has a rather strange reaction to this. Meanwhile, Daniel manages to assemble a surveillance system from the found pieces of electronics and installs a camera by the door. At night, everything goes as usual. Ciara dances when there is a knock on the door, and Daniel suggests that a person has come. Madeline forbids opening it, but they hear the voice of Ciara's husband. Ciara tries to prove that it is John by asking him what book she is reading, but he does not answer. Although they bought this book together on his advice, the man begs to be saved from death. Ciara asks to look into the camera, but when he leans towards it, something drags him into the forest. Immediately there is a knock on the mirror stronger than ever before. Madeline stands in front of the people, as if shielding them, and the knocking stops. In the morning, Madeline throws the bicycle into the burrow, demanding that they no longer break the rules. Later, Mina recalls her sister and mother, who invited the girls for a car ride. The weather was beautiful and Mina opened the window. Her mother asked her to close it because the wind was bothering her, but Mina didn't listen, mimicking her mother, who got distracted from the road. The tragedy happened, for which Mina still feels guilty. Winter soon arrived. The days grew shorter, the nights colder, and food became increasingly scarce. Quarrels began to flare up among the cabin's inhabitants. One day, Sierra left for the forest. Mina caught up with her, and she confessed that she felt John was real. She runs to the house from where Daniel's screams are heard, angry with Madeline and Mina, refusing to let them inside. The women hide under a tree and soon see lanky, spider-like monsters emerging from the forest, approaching the cabin window, and making terrible shrill noises. The watchers stare at Daniel and Sierra while Mina and Madeline wait for them to leave so they can return to the cabin. When they do, the women rush to the door and beg to be let in. Daniel refuses, and then Mina tells him about her guilt towards her mother. She asks him to understand that he will suffer all his life, realizing that he is responsible for the death of people. The doors open. The four of them immediately stand in front of the mirror, hoping to convince the watchers that they are in place. Madeline admits that she tried to protect them from certain things. She used to teach history and mythology, and unlike them, came here voluntarily. Only here did she realize how dangerous this place was. Once she hunted alone and saw herself at sunset. Not an exact copy, but very similar. The Watchers are an ancient species with many names: changelings, winged ones, fairies. They study people to impersonate them, and they will never let them leave. Knocks and the voices of the cabin's inhabitants are heard outside. Then Daniel finds a hatch in the floor, which they didn't even know existed. Descending, they discover a well-fortified and equipped living space filled with food and equipment. Mina turns on an old computer, and a video recording shows the face of the professor, whose real name was Rory Kilmartin. He was the first to study the Watchers and tried to learn about their origins. In 1979, the scientist found this place, which he called Wonderlamp. Every evening, the Watchers came to his window and studied him. For many years before this, the professor's colleagues laughed at him, not believing his tales. Then he built this bunker, using the labor of men from nearby remote villages. He chose the lonely or those with bad habits so that their disappearance would not attract much attention, as every evening he convinced them to have dinner outdoors. Hiding inside, he watched the Watchers deal with them. Thus this bunker was built on blood. One day, a Watcher appeared before him in the form of a girl with red hair. She was very different from the others, as if she were unique and looked curious and harmless. That's when he realized that if he unlocked the secrets of the fairies, he might even conquer death. He did the impossible, lured this girl into a cage and began experiments on communication, trying to befriend her. She changed form, sometimes turning into a frightening creature with long arms, but seemed to listen to him. Gradually, she became close and understandable to him, but now the professor realized he had achieved nothing significant and was ready to end his life. He hid a boat by the river, and this is the only way out. Just follow the birds. He asked the survivor to go to his university office and destroy all the documents found there, and now he will go to her and stay here forever. In the last recording, they see Kilmartin climbing up. Gunshots are heard, and then all is quiet. Realizing that this is their last night in the forest, Sierra turns on the music and invites Daniel to dance, but he seems upset about leaving. He says his family is dysfunctional, and he has nowhere to return to. Then the girl offers to let him stay with her for a while until they find him a good occupation and place to live, as they have become good friends. In the morning, the group sets out to escape, guided by the signs and Mina's parrot, whom she asked to lead them. Soon they reach a massive stone disc in the ground, covering the entrance to a huge tunnel. Madeline explains that this is where the last representatives of the ancient fairy race were locked up, who were once very friendly with humans. After many centuries, they managed to surface, but now the friendship has turned into hatred. They stay here because they are held by magic, so they need to run far away. They walk all day. Dusk falls, but there is no river or boat in sight. It starts raining, and they fall into despair when they see huge flocks of birds flying in one direction. They run after them and reach the river. The women rush to the boat when Daniel hears screams behind him and sees John. He returns for him, rejoicing that the man survived, but it turns out to be a changeling. The women scream, begging Daniel to run, but he doesn't hear and dies at the hands of the Watcher, who then takes on his form while Madeline, Mina, and Ciara sail down the river. The women wake up in the boat and see that they have returned to civilization. They stop a bus and ride to the city, listening to music and only now realizing that it's over. Later, Mina goes to the university where Kilmartin worked, posing as his niece to enter his office and fulfill his last request. There, she finds more documents, photos, and a recording in which he discusses the fairies and the fact that there are still half-blood children in the world. Mina finds a stack of photos and, looking at them, seems very surprised. In the evening, Mina goes to Ciara's house, showing a photo of Madeline from the professor's belongings, explaining that it is his wife who died several years ago. So the Madeline they lived with in the cabin was a special fairy capable of moving during the day. It was she whom Kilmartin caught. He couldn't kill her, and she took on Madeline's form to return to civilization. Then a car pulls up to the house, and the real Ciara gets out, while the one she's talking to is actually a fairy. Realizing she has been exposed, the fairy knocks Mina out and changes shape again, turning into Daniel. They just want to live like other species, but due to human hatred, they are forced to stay underground. The fairy turns into Kilmartin and goes to Mina. In the house, the fairy transforms into her and prepares to kill the girl. But Mina says that there are others like her somewhere because she is half human and acknowledges that it was unfair of humans to banish the fairies from their world. The fairy softens and spreads her wings, admitting that Mina might be right, and she flies away. Mina revives Ciara. Later, she reunites with her twin sister Lucy, finally forgiving herself for their mother's death. She tells her about her experience, admitting that she still sees Madeline appearing in the forms of other people. Her nieces arrive to show Mina a drawing of her and Darwin, whom she still keeps as a pet. Meanwhile, outside, a girl with red hair appears, looking at their apartment windows and taking on the form of a girl with a strange face. This is probably not a horror movie, but rather a scary bedtime story when a child doesn't want to sleep and asks for something frightening. Everything builds up slowly and tastefully, but the ending unfolds somewhat mundanely, although mysteriously. Bob is an ordinary man at first glance, living in a small northern town and working at a lumber mill. His ex-family, his wife Darlene and daughter Eva, live far from him. Their relationship is strained. The girl has reached a troublesome age, behaving oddly and completely ignoring her mother. One ordinary day, Bob returns home and receives a call from Darlene, who complains about their daughter and asks him to influence her. However, Bob asks to be forgotten and ends the call abruptly. Yet, he is deeply upset by Eva's behavior, and to relieve some tension, heads to a bar where he soon notices a dealer. Later, they meet on the street. The young man tells him that his boss, Nelson, is in need of couriers. He remembers Bob from his NHL days, especially a famous fight Bob would rather forget. The man cuts off the young man's enthusiasms and buys some goods, dismayed by the rising prices. At work, Bob goes to inspect one of the malfunctioning blocks of the crusher. He climbs up to the machine and stares inside as if he wants to step into the blades. His grim thoughts are interrupted by a coworker's voice, and Bob abandons the frightening idea. Later, Bob tells his boss he needs a few days off, packs his things, and goes on a trip. However, on the night road, he suddenly feels very ill. Racked with pain, he loses control, and his pickup veers off the road. Barely recovering, Bob calls Nelson and then reaches a roadside cafe where he immediately heads to the bathroom, startling patrons with his bloodied face. Overcoming pain, Bob washes the blood off his hands, which are already bandaged, and then examines his side. It becomes clear that a piece of his skin has become invisible, making his internal organs clearly visible. Bob bandages himself with towels and returns to the dining area, where Nelson soon arrives. The dealer agrees to tow and fix his pickup, in exchange for which Bob will have to serve as his courier, especially since he is heading in the needed direction. Nelson admires his hockey talent and confesses he still watches his old games. He tries to offer support, but Bob cuts off his attempts to befriend him and reluctantly agrees to become a courier. Nelson brings Bob home, then heads to a dump frequented by bears. This time, he shoots one of the animals and guts it on the spot. In the morning, Nelson delivers to Bob a container with the animal's organs, which are to be sold on the black market. The pickup is already repaired, and Bob sets off. He reaches his ex-wife's house late in the evening. Darlene lets Bob inside and informs him that Eva is staying over at a friend's. In the morning, Bob prepares to meet Nelson's contact, who runs a repair shop in town. At that moment, Eva appears. She is happy to see her father, but feels hurt when he refuses to take her with him. Bob drives to the shop, where the owner's employees greet him with a search, but the owner recognizes the former hockey player. He warns that working with Nelson is dangerous and advises thinking about the future. Nevertheless, he hands over the package for the dealer, and noticing Bob's unwell appearance, he gives him a Chinese remedy he gets from a local store. Later, Bob returns home. Ava also notices that her father is feeling unwell, but he brushes it off as Rib's injured at work. Suddenly, the girl asks about the diagnosis of her grandfather, Bob's father, who had died long ago. The man explains that his father voluntarily left this life because he had some issues with his head. After the conversation, Eva runs off to her friends, but on the way she stops by a Chinese pharmacy. The seller is very welcoming and even suggests visiting a doctor who is available right there in the next room. Even when the girl refuses to buy anything, the seller gives Eva herbal tea to improve her skin. Later, Eva meets up with her friends, who suggest going on a tour of an abandoned psychiatric hospital. Although Eva's friend doesn't want to go, Eva insists on visiting more than anyone else. They wander around the creepy rooms, scaring each other with possible ghost encounters. Eva confesses that her grandfather was once a patient there, whom she never knew as he died before she was born. She hopes to find old documents and learn his diagnosis. The group descends into the basement, where they are frightened by a figure in a white sheet, but on a closer look it turns out to be just a pile of rags. However, Eva's friend in terror grabs her hand, tugs at her sleeve, and sees a transparent hand. The girl gets even more frightened and runs away from Eva. Meanwhile, her parents recall their years together and Eva's childhood pranks, like when she went to school on her own at the age of 6. In the morning, Darlin discovers that Eva didn't spend the night at home. She, her friend, and Bob begin to search for the girl, but she's neither at the hospital nor the police station. Darlin goes to the station to file a report, and Bob starts investigating his daughter's belongings. He finds her phone and reads a chat with friends about the planned excursion. The couple goes to Eva's friend's house, but her father says their daughter isn't there. Later, Bob calls Nelson and reports that the delivery will be delayed. The dealer is very displeased. After this, Bob finds Eva's friends. They act provocatively and the man loses control. After a scuffle, a boy admits they were at the psychiatric hospital. Bob realizes she was looking for her grandfather's data. At the same time, Eva regains consciousness in an iron cage. Meanwhile, her parents drive to the psychiatric hospital and enter the still functioning part. The security tries to stop them from entering, but Bob gets into a fight and collapses from severe pain. The chief physician comes out, who remembers both his father and Bob well. She asks Darlin to leave her husband in the clinic, as he is not well. Bob remembers himself as a little boy in the same corridor. Later, he argues with the doctor, who calls what happened to his father a tragic accident, as he saw it all himself. The woman confesses that his father wanted to die to hide his illness from others. He was very afraid for his family. Bob immediately remembers how his father asked not to show him to his son. The doctor reminds that she couldn't stop the disease, but she protected the man. She shows the room of his father from where he watched his son's life and offers Bob to stay in the clinic. She will study his illness and provide all necessary care, but Bob categorically refuses, as Ava needs him. Nevertheless, they lock him up. However, at night he wakes up to the sound of an opening door and sees that the way is clear and a bunch of keys to the clinic doors is on the bedside table. Bob dresses and leaves. He arrives home, but Darlin isn't there. Only her friend is going crazy with worry for the missing ones. Then Nelson calls again and starts threatening Bob, listing his family members, which drives the man over the edge. Hearing his swearing, Darlin's friend tells him that girls have been disappearing in the town for a long time and demands that something be done. He goes to her friend's house again, and this time he manages to meet her. The girl confesses that she now knows her friend's secret. She is the same as him. She hands over Eva's backpack that was left with her. Bob examines it and finds a package with Chinese tea in the same packaging that he himself received from the owner of the workshop for Nelson. He goes to the man and asks questions about the missing girls. The man is offended. Despite his illegal activities, he is a father and grandfather and would not kidnap people. He tells about the Chinese pharmacy. Meanwhile, unknown people examine Eva, probing her wounds, causing the girl to cry. Bob finds the pharmacy and tells the seller about his missing daughter. The woman is scared, but afraid to tell the truth. Then Bob notices Eva's bicycle in the back of the shop. He removes his hood. The woman is horrified, seeing his disappearing flesh, and she realizes that the girl is just like him. She tries to protect the doctor, glancing towards his office. Realizing this, Bob rushes in that direction, stripping off his clothes along the way. He descends into the basement, finds the doctor and his assistant, and starts beating them, demanding his daughter back. Then he hears Eva's voice calling him from a cage. Seeing what her father looks like, Ava is scared, but Bob calms her down and opens the cage, but the doctor manages to wound him. Bob leaves with his daughter. As a parting gift, the seller gives him tea that will help Ava and advises them to run. Father and daughter arrive home. Darlin immediately begins to provide help. It turns out she knew the father's secret and knows what to do. She couldn't confess to her daughter because she was afraid for her. In the morning, Bob regains consciousness and tells his daughter that he had to leave because of the illness. Ava confesses that she quit sports when she started having the same issues. She thought she was alone in this, but it turns out that her father and grandfather also suffered from invisibility. Later, Bob prepares to leave, although Eva doesn't want him to go, but the man confesses that his strength is leaving him, and soon everyone might find out his secret. He says goodbye to Darlin as Eva appears at the doorway with bags, intending to drive her father home herself. Through tears, the mother agrees to let her go. Father and daughter set off. Along the way, Eva starts asking questions. Bob admits that after what he experienced in childhood, he couldn't burden his family, so he left. The daughter promises to make up for everything they missed in their relationship. Soon they arrive at the place where Nelson's new courier is waiting. Bob needs to meet him, but he notices that his face is also beginning to disappear. Eva covers the void with foundation, and the father goes to the meeting. He delivers the package passed by his boss and returns to the car. Soon they reach Bob's home, and the father hands over the tea he got from the Chinese lady to Ava. She brews it and cares for her weakened father. He assures her that she can live here peacefully. People in the north don't meddle in each other's affairs. Meanwhile, Nelson opens the package and finds that he has been deceived. Ava goes shopping, and the dealer notices her. Later, the girl tries to calm her father, who has become almost invisible, and after a while he suddenly says that it's time for him to go, because later he simply will not be able to accomplish what he planned. He is ready to disappear at the sawmill, which he had already tried to do. Despite her objections, Bob drives to the factory, but standing over the crusher, he suddenly stops. At this time, an armed Nelson bursts into his house. He threatens the girl with a shotgun, demanding to know where Bob is. Even though Eva says that he sold the house to her, the man realizes it's not true since Bob's belongings are still there. He accuses Bob of dishonesty and decides to take it out on his daughter. Suddenly, something throws him away from Eva. The girl realizes that her father, who has become completely invisible, has returned and is using this to beat the villain. Bob demands that he leave his family alone, but misjudging his strength, kills the dealer. He confesses that he could not leave his daughter a second time, and now he will always be with her. Later they dump Nelson's body at the dump, where a bear finds it. Eva buys herself tinted glasses, sits in the empty car, and talks to her father, who advises her to drink her magic tea, as it helps, and he confesses that back then, when she was 6, he secretly followed her to school. Also, his father had told him that he did not want his son to see him like that, and he always thought his father meant death. But then, who pulled him out of the psychiatric hospital? Eva immediately remembers the white figure from the basement, smiles, and suggests talking to her grandfather. The seatbelt buckles the void, and father and daughter set off. An unusual Canadian horror film, shot amidst the harsh northern nature. A mix of genres ranging from action to thriller and horror, plus a bit of sentimental drama. All this captivates and compels one to watch the film to the end, although initially, it seems quite gloomy. The movie begins in Leningrad in 1940. A young woman named Anya works as a seamstress in a factory where a young machinist, Vasily, who is very serious, notices her and even asks her to introduce him to her only relative, her brother Peter. However, Anya asks for a little more time, and the young man agrees to wait until the next day. But as the girl leaves for her lunch break, he quietly follows her, admiring her. Anya walks down the street, looking at a dirigible hovering above, from which German journalists are filming the city below. At this moment, a tram driven by Peter pulls up to an intersection. Suddenly, Anya realizes that a fast-moving truck is about to crash into the tram, and her brother will likely perish. Frozen in fear, she suddenly emits light waves that lift the truck into the air and throw it away from the intersection. The tram's windows shatter, injuring people, but a major accident is averted. This entire incident is captured on film by the journalists in the dirigible. As the shocked people try to recover, Peter jumps out of the tram, grabs Anya, and quickly takes her away. The girl regains consciousness in their shared room. Peter packs their belongings, urging his sister to flee Leningrad, although she is reluctant since they have already had to move several times due to her supernatural abilities manifesting at the most inappropriate times and attracting the attention of the authorities. Peter asks her to control her powers, but Anya is unable to master them as they are beyond her control. At that moment, representatives of the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs burst into the room and arrest the siblings. An investigator named Ivan arrives at the scene. He interviews the victims, and one of the women recalls the strange girl standing at the crossroad. Back at the office, Ivan begins interrogating Anya, but she cannot provide any concrete information. She insists it was just an unfortunate accident, and then Ivan shows her photos from their previous residences where strange incidents and destruction occurred, prompting the siblings to move hastily. The investigator is willing to believe she is not a criminal, especially since he has also witnessed something very strange in his life. However, Ivan is unable to elaborate as his superior, Petrov, who turns out to be his father-in-law, takes Anya and leads her to the secret facilities managed by Professor Ilyinsky. The scientist welcomes the girl, explaining that she is special and now they will study her abilities. However, Anya refuses to cooperate until she sees her brother, and Ilyinsky promises to arrange a meeting for them. Meanwhile, Ivan cannot calm down, although Petrov, who is also his father-in-law, demands he forget the incident and focus on other matters. He had already barely managed to suppress his absurd report about an incident in Madrid. Returning home, Ivan tries to tell everything to his wife Vera, but she asks him to take a vacation and forget everything that happened. The action shifts to 1936. A group of Soviet soldiers, including Ivan, engages in battle with Spanish fascists in Madrid. Suddenly, a man in a strict coat and hat, wearing a strange mask, appears before them. Looking at the soldiers, he utters something incomprehensible, after which Ivan's comrades start shooting themselves one by one. Only Ivan finds the strength to shoot at the man in the mask. The man quickly disappears, leaving Ivan amidst his fallen comrades. The year is 1940. A man in a mask named Neumann and his assistant Katerina arrive in Munich, where the woman meets a Jewish boy named Baruch on the street, who plays chess brilliantly. She offers him a ride with them, noting he can always leave if he does not like their school. An orphan agrees and gets into the car, where Neumann utters several hissing words, causing Baruch to fall asleep instantly. Neumann agrees that the boy is brilliant, but by no means possesses superpowers. However, Katerina is determined to help the boy. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Professor Ilyinsky leads Anya to the laboratory where she will be studied, and fulfilling his promise, brings her to a cell to see her brother. Peter again asks her not to show her abilities, and she promises to write to him. Baruch is brought to an ancient castle owned by Neumann. The boy is laid in a hammock in a hall inhabited by many other teenagers, but when the adults leave, he wakes up and is frightened by the dark silhouettes surrounding him. Back in Moscow, Professor Ilyinsky leads Anya to a separate room, more like a cell, and locks her in there. He then reports to Petrov that he has never seen anything like it. The girl is a scientific discovery, a unique case, to which the chief objects. She is a new weapon. Later, Anya is subjected to various tests, but she shows nothing special. Ivan cannot forget the incident, studying everything related to the strange explosion. The video footage of the accident also reaches Neumann, and he decides to fly to the USSR. There, the man is taken to meet with Professor Ilyinsky. Neumann introduces himself as a worker from the Ahnenerbe organization and immediately determines that the professor is terminally ill. He offers to ease his pain if the professor allows him to speak with Anya. Ilyinsky does not believe in his abilities, but Neumann utters something, and glowing waves emanate from him, enveloping the professor, causing him to lose consciousness. Taking advantage of this, Neumann searches his desk and takes some papers. Soon, Ilyinsky regains consciousness, but strangely feels no pain. He agrees to arrange a meeting with Anya and leads the German to the laboratory. Neumann approaches the girl and secretly shows her an execution order for her brother. Then waves of unprecedented force begin to emanate from the girl, literally blowing up the entire laboratory. Neumann grabs her and escapes. Ivan sees from the window a man in a hat whom he immediately recognizes and runs to the laboratory where explosions are heard. But Neumann and the girl are nowhere to be found. The narrative shifts to 1924. In a remote Karelian village, a woman lives with two children, Peter and Anya. One day they go with the village boys into the forest. Suddenly a pack of wolves leaps out at the children. The children freeze in fear, but waves emanate from Anya, scattering the beasts. When the men arrive at the clearing, they find the girl dead. 1940. Petrov enters the devastated laboratory, where people connected by tubes into a single organism and marked with the letter M lie in chairs. At first glance, this structure was not damaged by the explosion, as the injured Ilyinsky lying nearby confirms. The professor reports that Anya caused all this and refuses to continue the experiments. Then, Petrov shoots him. Afterward, he goes to Ilyinsky's colleague, who everyone simply calls Professor Lyubov. Petrov asks her to activate the M Squad. Learning about the professor's death, the woman refuses to help Petrov, but he reminds her of her family, and Lyubov reluctantly agrees. On the train, a customs officer searches Newman's compartment and finds an iron sarcophagus with Anya inside. Unsure of what to do, he goes for help. Meanwhile, Anya envisions her own funeral following the incident with the wolves. Frightened, she comes to, and Newman informs her that he is saving her. Anya tries to run, but the customs officers, who decided to detain the strange German, stop her. However, he utters something, and the military personnel bring their pistols to their own heads. Neumann and Anya leave. At the same time in Moscow, Petrov reports to his colleagues that a member of the Ahnenerbe, which translates to ancestral heritage, Neumann has stolen a valuable exhibit from the USSR, the girl Anya. A squad has already been formed to pursue the German and will depart in a matter of days. Learning of this, Ivan requests to be included, but Petrov, feeling sorry for his daughter, refuses to do so. Neumann leads Anya to a spot where Katerina's car is waiting, and she drives the pair to the castle. It is apparent that the woman does not like Neumann's new toy, but he immediately says that Anya is just like him. At the castle, they are greeted by children whom Neumann calls his army. Anya is escorted to her room, and Newman finds a guest in his office, Admiral Canaris, who is very interested in the scientist's research. But today he has come to express his displeasure with Neumann's sabotage in the USSR, as it could start a war. Newman reassures him and invites him to a formal dinner. Meanwhile, Anya is startled by a sound and sees Baruch in her room, trying to open her window to escape the castle. But Katerina and Newman appear and stop him. While Katerina takes the boy away, Newman tries to convince Anya that the castle is a paradise, and no one wants to leave of their own volition. Katerina brings Baruch to a bedroom, reminding him that he must speak only German and not tell anyone his real name if he wants to live. But when she leaves, the other teenagers attack him. In Moscow, Ivan asks his wife to help him get enrolled in the squad, after which he goes to Professor Lyubov. He is interested in whether hypnosis can make a person do what another wants. The professor asks him not to travel to Germany, but he is determined to find the man in the mask. In the castle, Anya finds Baruch hanging. The boy tries to explain that the others hate him and beat him, therefore he wants to run away. But Anya admits that it was the same for her until she became strong, and he can too. Later they find Neumann in the park, who promises Anya he will teach her to control her power. He explains that he inherited the castle from the person who adopted him, and now it serves as a refuge. He has set up Anya's room according to her taste and hopes she will like it here. Grateful, Anya sits down at the sewing machine, unexpectedly remembering how the villagers burned their house, calling her a witch. Then her brother saved her, though their mother died in the fire. Back in Moscow, Petrov enrolls Ivan in the squad and asks the commander to ensure that he does not return. Leningrad, 1937. Returning from Madrid, Ivan writes in his report everything he witnessed, but Petrov does not believe him, noting that if the soldiers shot themselves, they could be declared deserters. Tired of trying to convince the young man, Petrov takes him to Professor Lyubov. 1940. A special forces unit travels to Germany in a grain car. Ivan warns his comrades about Neumann's peculiarities, but it seems they don't quite believe him. At the castle, the children undergo daily training, while Anya enjoys the long-forgotten peace. In the morning, Katerina brings her a box with a new dress sent by Neumann for her to wear at his birthday party. The girl goes out to the hall where the children are preparing decorations for the evening, and then they head to training. Baruch is afraid of heights and falls from a rope ladder, but no one pities him. After that, it's time for shooting practice, but the boy throws his pistol down and runs to the local cemetery where Neumann finds him. Baruch asks to be let go, but the scientist promises to teach him not to be afraid. Meanwhile, Squad M climbs out of the wagon, and Ivan remembers his training in 1936 before being sent to Madrid. Then his comrades met him coldly because he was the boss's son-in-law, but Ivan earned respect through hard work and cleverness. And now he is on a special mission. Suddenly, they are hailed by an old man who turns out to be their liaison and must take them to the castle. At the same time, Petrov is informed that the squad has successfully crossed the border. Guests start arriving at the castle. Neumann welcomes Canaris and escorts him to the hall where music plays, and ladies and gentlemen drink and talk about the beautiful evening. Neumann himself is enchanted by Anya's beauty, and she gives him a hand-embroidered handkerchief she made for him. Later, guests deliver laudatory speeches in honor of the birthday boy, and he invites Anya to dance to the envy of the present ladies. Canaris notices Katerina's displeasure, but the woman remains cold, rejecting his advances. She dislikes Canaris's interest in their wards, and he tells her that people are already coming for Anya from the USSR. Squad M reaches the forest house of their liaison, who supplies them with weapons and draws a path on a map, but then shots ring out. German soldiers have caught up with the saboteurs. A battle ensues and the Russians win. Later, the commander finishes off the wounded enemies and, unexpectedly for Ivan, shoots the liaison, indicating that they have no orders to return. At the castle, Canaris agrees to play chess with Baruch, and the boy wins. The admiral admires his genius, but upon learning that the boy is Jewish, he pulls out a pistol. Anya sees the man aiming at the child, and her powers activate. Guests watch in horror as everything in the hall begins to rise into the air. The admiral himself is lifted up, but at that moment Neumann grabs the girl by the shoulder. She faints, and Canaris falls to the floor. Everything stops immediately, but people scream and scatter. The furious admiral orders all children to be destroyed within 3 days and departs. Neumann escorts Anya to her room and admires her because today she managed to stop. The girl does not understand why it is necessary to destroy the Jews, and Neumann reminds her that no one pitied them either, as they were not like everyone else. The man returns to his office where Katerina awaits him, but he does not accept her attentions because he is seriously captivated by Anya and hopes to succeed with her. However, Katerina is saddened by this turn in their relationship and reminds him of Canaris's order, but Neumann intends to make a profitable deal. The action shifts to Neumann's childhood when children laughed at him and drove him away. His parents were forced to put a mask with a digital lock on him so he couldn't harm anyone, and the boy suffered greatly from this. One day his father complained to the landlord that his son was hindering his ability to fulfill his duties as a tenant, and the man came to see the unusual child. They explained to him that Neumann scared all the guests and caused his father to lose a finger. The year is 1940. The morning after the dinner, Anya goes out to the hall, but the servants who witnessed yesterday's incident look at her warily. Then the girl goes to the park, where she is met by an armed Katerina, but seeing the guards, she returns to the house. Later, Neumann conducts a meditation for the teenagers, asking Thor to give them strength. Anya sees this and asks for permission to start training. Neumann orders Katerina to stay at the castle and wait for guests, and he takes Anya away. Meanwhile, the squad continues to move through the forest. Soon they find a rubber boat at the prearranged place. Neumann puts Anya on his personal plane and takes her to his parents' house. Landing, they walk across a bridge, and suddenly Neumann asks the girl to remember her brother. Her powers activate. Water rises up, carrying fish and creating a reverse waterfall. But then the man calls her. Anya comes to her senses, and everything returns to normal. However, now she can use her powers when she needs to. Soon they enter an old house, and Neumann recalls how he was taken from his father's home. Lastly, his mother writes down the password to his mask on a piece of paper, and little Neumann leaves their lives forever. In the present, he tells that his father was a harsh and cruel man, often beating him and his mother, so he promised himself that his child would never be unhappy. The man remembers how his patron removed his mask and wanted to throw it away, but Neumann did not allow it. The man informed him that he would now take care of him, but he must trust him. Soon they arrived at the castle, where the patron confessed that every person has the right to be happy, and the boy lived for the first time like a normal child. But a year later, war came. His patron went away on business, and their home turned into a hospital. Neumann helped as best he could. Once he had to assist in the amputation of a leg. The soldier was in great pain, and then Neumann activated his powers and relieved the poor man of his suffering during the operation. Later, he confessed to one of the nurses that he loved her. The adult woman laughed at the boy but said she loved him too. But one day he caught his nurse with one of the recovering soldiers, and in a fit of rage he made the soldier kill himself with a hammer. They caught him, gagged him, tied him up, and took him away from the castle. In 1940 he tells Anya that his parents died, so he is so happy to have found her. The girl lights candles in the fireplace, using her new powers, which delights Newman. They drink wine and then become close. At night, Anya dreams where Baruch dies and wakes up terrified. She asks Newman to return to the castle. Meanwhile, the squad reaches the river. One of the soldiers is wounded and runs out of strength. Then he takes his own life so as not to be a burden to his comrades. Only 3 remain, but they still row towards the castle. And there Katerina, who can't sleep, reminisces about the past when she helped her mother, who worked in a psychiatric hospital, where one day they brought in a tied-up boy named Neumann. She then freed him, and he promised never to harm her. The year is 1936, Leningrad. Petrov attends a lecture by Professor Ilyinsky, where he discusses a significant discovery in the field of controlling human memory and emotions. Ilyinsky's colleague, Professor Lyubov, is inspired by the future changes, as people with good mental health will be able to work better and create a brilliant future for themselves and their children. The Project M envisions a new society where happy people with immense productivity and willpower will live. Petrov asks about the use of these discoveries in the military sphere, arguing that if a new society is to be built, it must be able to defend itself. However, Lyubov categorically opposes totalitarianism. After the lecture, Petrov offers Ilyinsky full support for their program if he agrees to operate under military auspices. But Ilyinsky sends him to Lyubov as the ideational inspiration behind the project. However, the woman flatly refuses to cooperate with the military. That same day, she is hit by a car in the street. Later, Petrov returns to Ilyinsky, informing him of the unfortunate accident with his colleague, and Ilyinsky reluctantly agrees to cooperate. Again, 1940-year Germany. The 3 remaining members of the squad reach the castle's territory. Surprised by the lack of security, they enter the premises. Petrov receives a summary of incidents in a specific area of Germany and realizes that everything is going according to plan. His boss is horrified. His people have left a very noticeable trail, which could easily lead to the USSR being accused of provocation. But Petrov assures him that everything was planned this way and there will be no international conflict. At that moment, his daughter calls and he rushes home. The squad members reach the castle and, splitting up, begin to explore the premises. Meanwhile, Petrov finds Vera in a hysterical state. She is going mad with worry for her husband, and the father decides to take action. At the same time in the castle, Katerina reads a book to the children, and seeing her nervousness, they calm the woman. She orders lights out and leaves, just as Ivan enters the hall from the other side. Seeing the children in front of him, the man lowers his weapon and leaves. The children remain motionless. The soldiers continue to explore the castle, and now the squad leader enters the hall with the children. But he does not lower his weapon and prepares to shoot. Then the children attack first. The commander fires in all directions, but the teenagers throw their clothes at him and knock him down. The eldest orders the pistol handed to Baruch to kill the enemy, but the boy cannot shoot the man, and the man manages to wound him with a knife before being killed. The children carry the bleeding Baruch to the bedroom, leaving the soldier's body on the hall floor. The 3rd squad member, a female warrior, finds Katerina's office and engages her in a shootout. Katerina flees, but the woman catches up to her, and they fight. The woman is defeated when Katerina pushes her away. Seeing her opponent unconscious, the German grabs a pistol but doesn't manage to shoot because Ivan appears. Threatening him with a pistol, the woman captures him. In Moscow, Petrov brings his daughter to Professor Lyubov and asks her to erase the girl's memory. Lyubov is outraged by this request, as the love for a husband is the most precious thing in Vera's life. However, under military pressure, she agrees and performs the necessary manipulations, while Petrov's subordinates methodically clear their apartment of photographs and items belonging to Ivan. But one photograph falls under a chest of drawers, and the soldier does not notice it. After the procedure, the girl regains consciousness but does not remember her husband at all. At this time, the teenagers attack Ivan, not noticing Katerina, and wound him in the arm. The woman drives off the aggressive children and escorts the wounded man to Neuman's office, where she admits to Ivan that she recognized him because she had seen him in Madrid. He asked why her master kidnapped Anya. Could it be that he wants to use her in the war? Katerina assures him that he still doesn't understand. People are petty and greedy creatures fighting for power. Neumann is unique. He is ready to seize all power on Earth to save the world from war. Meanwhile, Neumann and Anya arrive at the castle and find a wounded woman on the threshold. The scientist finishes her off with a pistol while Anya runs to the bedroom to the teenagers and finds Baruch dead. At this time, Ivan is bandaging himself while Katerina explains that they teach the children survival by developing their skills, because their destiny is to save the world under Neumann's leadership. The woman offers to help him escape if he will help her, but before Ivan can hear her out, Neumann enters the door. The Russian immediately picks up a pistol and takes the woman hostage. However, the German informs him that he does not care about her fate, which visibly upsets her. At that moment, Anya runs into the office and uses her power to knock Ivan off his feet, but when she recognizes the man, Neumann quickly takes her away, leaving the Russian with Katerina. In Moscow, Professor Lyubov mourns Ilyinsky when Petrov brings her folders with the names of the condemned, whom she can save by including them in Squad M. She remembers how after the accident, Ilyinsky came to her in the hospital. The man was shocked to learn that she had been mutilated by the military, but he was frightened and could not refuse to cooperate. Now the woman is alone and forced to make difficult decisions. She takes out a vial of M activator and recalls Ivan's story about the man in the mask. After his return from Madrid, she worked with his memory, suggesting removing the traumatic memories of his comrades' deaths, but Ivan refused to erase his life. And now the young man is chained in a cell in the castle of the man in the mask. Later, Anya visits him, accusing him of killing Baruch, but the boy denies it, and he is not particularly interested in her fate. He only wants to destroy Neumann because all evil comes from him. He hypnotizes children, turning them into killers. Their conversation is interrupted by Naumann's appearance. After sending Anya away, he thanks the young man for revealing his vulnerability, as he is the only one who could stand up to him. To prove it, the scientist shows the finger shot off by Ivan in Madrid. He too is special, and Neumann really wants the Russian to join his side. Yes, he killed his friends, but it was war. He came to Ahnenerbe to find gifted people. Anya is like him, and they are the future. He asks Ivan to admit why he is immune to his hypnosis. Then Ivan reveals that there is a whole squad like him, Squad M. There are many of them, and they will all be here soon. So Neumann cannot hide. After talking with Ivan, Neumann finds Anya in the castle's backyard. The girl asks him to hand over all affairs to Katerina and to leave this place forever. But Neumann does not want to run because they are extraordinary people, and when they are together they are unbeatable. He asks for her help in defending their new home. Later, he thanks Katerina for managing the situation and confesses that he is glad she was not hurt during the Russian raid. Meanwhile, Anya remembers how in Moscow she wrote letters to her brother while locked up in the laboratory. She used to give them to the professor, but she could not have imagined that he read her letters to Peter, who was undergoing mental processing as a participant in Squad M. At this time, she burns them in the backyard of the castle, hoping that life will give her a chance to start over. Later, the castle's inhabitants conduct a funeral rite for Baruch. The teenagers carry the boy's body to the seashore, where the cemetery is located, and burn it on a ritual pyre. Anya is shocked by the number of children's graves and realizes that Ivan was telling the truth. Katerina urges her to leave and save herself. Anya runs to Ivan's cell and asks him to tell her what he saw in Madrid that was so special. The boy talks about the death of his comrades and Neumann's chilling whisper, but the German doesn't know that he just had a misfire. He is not special and survived only because of the pistol's malfunction, but if Neumann finds out, he will kill him immediately. And only Anya can stand up to him. Out of the darkness comes Katerina, who has heard everything. She will let them go if they leave forever. Neumann is planning to sell the children to Canaris, and Anya can do nothing about it. They are weapons, and it is high time the Russian understood this. But Anya runs away while Katerina frees Ivan from his chains and advises him to make sure the German never finds them. Meanwhile in Moscow, Petrov enjoys his daughter's good mood, hoping she will meet another man, marry, and give him grandchildren. The girl is lively and cheerful, unaware that the photo under the dresser awaits its moment. At this time, Neumann orders the Russian man to be killed, and he goes to look for Anya. Meanwhile, Katerina leads Ivan to her car, where number one's guard catches up with them. He engages in a fight with the Russian, and when he is about to kill him, Katerina attacks the guard. The guard is much stronger, and Katerina has to shoot. The teenagers hear the sound and run into the courtyard while Katerina puts Ivan in the car and drives him away from the estate. Neumann finds Anya at the cemetery. The girl asks him to let the children go, but he refuses. They are insignificant to him because he hopes to build a new world using their combined powers. Moreover, they will definitely have a son who will be the strongest and greatest on the planet. Hearing this, Anya wants to leave. Then Neumann sees Katerina's car and realizes what she is about to do. He puts on his quantum mask, which greatly amplifies the power of his voice, and begins to speak while Ivan stands on the car step and aims an assault rifle at him. The mask works. Katerina's car loses control and crashes from a high cliff into the water, but Ivan manages to jump from the step and survives. Then, members of the second squad M, who were heading to the castle, covering for the distracting maneuvers of the first squad, open fire on Neumann. But the soldiers are programmed for total destruction, and one of them engages in a fight with Ivan, not realizing he is an ally. The young man has to kill the soldier. Neumann asks Anya to activate her power, and the girl begins to do so when she recognizes one of the soldiers as her brother. Neumann is knocked down by her force, rocks crash from the sky, and the girl runs to Peter, realizing that this time he is indeed dead. Anya's powers activate again when Neumann falls from Ivan's shot. The girl mourns her brother as teenagers appear on the road. Ivan grabs Anya and drags her away while the children pick up Neumann's body and carry it into the castle. The Russians run to the airplane and manage to take off at the last moment. 9 months later, Neumann, who survived the injury, listens to Hitler's speeches and experiments with a new kind of influence on people, broadcasting his voice through radio equipment. Meanwhile, in Anya's native village, a bearded Ivan arrives from the woods as his woman is about to give birth. Pregnant Anya is dragged into the village where women come to help. As the birth proceeds, an announcement about the start of the war with Germany is broadcast from the speakers. Later, surrounded by streams of power, Anya gives birth to a healthy baby boy. Neumann is immediately informed by a fortune-telling girl. Then one of the villagers recognizes Anya and hurries to tell his fellow villagers whom they have just helped. But Ivan stops him when bombers appear in the sky, from which a large number of paratroopers descend. One day, oceanographer Tom's family, his wife Julia and 2 children, Cassie and Ben, set off on a yacht trip in the Caribbean Sea. While Tom and Ben are busy fishing and Cassie is absorbed in her gadget, Julia goes for a swim. Suddenly, something unsettles her. Julia looks around, but the sea remains as calm as ever. However, she feels a distinct sense of dread, as though something large and dangerous is circling around. At the same time, the instruments on the yacht start acting strangely, but Tom, preoccupied with fishing, pays no attention to them. Meanwhile, Julia feels worse and eventually begins to drown. She screams, but the family doesn't hear her. The water seems to shift and pull her farther from the yacht. As the situation becomes critical, Tom finally hears her voice. He rushes to the helm, and the yacht moves toward the distant Julia. Tom dives into the water. With the children's help, they pull her aboard and revive her. Tom is angry as he always asks that swimmers notify the others when going into the water. Julia apologizes and the incident is soon forgotten. Besides, the family has a reason to celebrate. Today is their son Ben's 13th birthday. Tom lights the candles on the cake and everyone congratulates Ben, who receives gifts, while Cassie takes a group photo of the happy family. At that moment, Cassie's boyfriend calls her. He asks her about the swim, but suddenly a sudden and intense storm begins in the background. Cassie is worried, but her boyfriend reassures her that he's safe. The connection cuts off. Cassie tells her parents about the storm on land, but then everyone feels some jolts, rushes to the deck, and sees massive whale carcasses surfacing around the yacht. Tom explains that sometimes whales get disoriented during storms, but these animals are pushing the yacht, threatening their safety. Tom dives into the water and soon returns aboard, injured. While trying to figure out what's going on, he cut himself on the propeller. Julia stitches up the cut on her husband's shoulder, and he explains that the yacht's shafts seem bent, likely from a tail strike. Now they're unlikely to be able to sail away. Later, Cassie tries to re-establish communication, but there's no signal. The radio isn't picking up any signals either. Tom begins calculating their supplies. There's enough water for about 4 days, no more, but they're on a shipping route, so someone is bound to find them. However, ominous sounds come from outside, and when the family steps out onto the deck, they see glowing objects falling from the sky. They fall closer and closer, and Tom, taking a risk, starts the engine. He manages to steer the yacht away from the next meteorite, but the engine is finally damaged. The next object falls so close that the family can see they are artificial satellites of Earth. A strong wind starts blowing, and the instruments go haywire. The terrified family hides inside the yacht, which is being tossed by the waves. They put on life jackets and prepare for the worst when a strange, ringing sound is heard, causing nosebleeds and nausea. Tom tries to signal for help with a flare gun, but it's all in vain. The family barely survives the night. In the morning they were relieved to find themselves alive, but there's a gaping hole in the side of the yacht, and it's unclear why they're still afloat. The family goes outside and freezes in amazement. The water is gone, and their boat is standing on a rocky outcrop in the middle of a stony desert where the ocean once was. Sometime later, Tom tries to reassure his family, saying that not everyone could have perished. He takes measurements and realizes that the compass is lying. North isn't where it's supposed to be. This means the Earth's poles have shifted. Such a thing has happened on Earth before, but a long time ago. It turns out that the sea has retreated to where the land used to be, and most likely humanity has perished. Cassie can't bear this revelation and runs to the cabin, asking to be left alone. Julia goes to inventory the remaining supplies, while Ben releases a bunch of colorful balloons into the sky, hoping survivors will come to their aid. Meanwhile, Tom turns on the radio, sending out distress signals. Unexpectedly, he hears a response. It's from Naoto, the captain of a small submersible. They were deep underwater when the catastrophe happened, and that's why they survived. However, all communication systems have failed, and expecting help is futile. According to his calculations, the sea will return in about a week, and it will be harsh, so the man advises them to find higher ground and stay there. Julia orders the children to pack their things. Tom directly asks the captain if he can save their children. Naoto explains that the submersible is very small. Unfortunately, Naoto's partner died, and he can only take one person. After some persuasion, Tom convinces Naoto to take both children, and he provides his coordinates. Tom charts a course on the nautical map and promises to reach the location in a couple of days. The next morning, the family is almost ready to embark on their journey. Tom steps onto the deck and suddenly sees a man with a dog approaching. He walks toward him and greets him, but notices that the man is injured. He offers the traveler some water. The man drinks it and then suddenly punches Tom in the face, which Julia sees. She rushes to her husband as the traveler plunges a makeshift spear into Tom's chest. The dog keeps Julia at bay, though she freezes in horror herself. Realizing there's no saving her husband, she runs to the yacht. The man pursues her, injuring her arm. Nevertheless, Julia climbs onto the deck, and the children, hearing her screams, run to her aid. Together, they barricade the doors to the cabin. After that, Julia hides Cassie and Ben in a locker, giving her daughter the flare gun and instructing her to shoot only as a last resort. Meanwhile, the killer tries to break down the doors and eventually succeeds. Julia hides in the bathroom, patching up her wound. Entering, the intruder heads straight to the galley and grabs some food. It's clear that he's very hungry. Holding a can of food, the man begins searching the yacht, while Julia arms herself with a kitchen knife. He enters the cabin, but the woman jumps overboard, hiding beneath the yacht. The killer peers through the hole but doesn't see her. However, the dog attacks Julia, forcing her to kill it. The man hears the yelp, goes outside, and finds the dog's body. Meanwhile, Julia climbs back onto the yacht through the portholes on the opposite side. She falls straight into the killer's hands. He beats her, throws her onto a couch, and grabs her throat, intending to strangle her. Cassie witnesses all this and realizes it's the last resort. She opens the locker and fires at the man. The shot throws him to the side, but the flare sets the yacht on fire. Julia orders the children to flee while she sneaks into the galley. The killer, only injured, tries to attack again. Julia kicks him away, grabs the packed bags, and jumps overboard, where Ben finds his father's body. Cassie runs to the corpse and sobs over it. Julia kisses her deceased husband, but seeing the killer leap from the burning yacht, she takes the children and leaves. The boat explodes behind them. The family runs across the stony desert and soon takes shelter in a rocky canyon, where a stream flows. However, the water is salty and undrinkable. Cassie shares a small amount of water with her brother, but he refuses to drink. The boy feels guilty, believing the killer came because he saw the balloons. Cassie also voices this thought, but Julia orders her to stop and defends her son, explaining that he didn't mean any harm. She tells the children to gather themselves, as a long journey awaits. and then she spots the killer again, still relentlessly following their trail. The family hurries onward. That evening, Ben finds the carcass of a hammerhead shark and tries to butcher it, but Julia sees the pursuer and orders the children to run. They soon come across a field of once flooded toxic waste barrels, but Julia urges the children forward despite the threat of contamination, knowing the killer is still on their heels. The family walks along the former ocean floor, weaving through piles of plastic and other trash dumped by humans. Soon, Julia notices that Ben is severely dehydrated and gives him the last drops of water. Cassie has a breakdown, convinced that they have no chance of survival, but Julia commands them to keep moving. Eventually, they find the fuselage of a plane that crashed into the sea long ago and crawl inside to rest. Julia examines the last photo of their family and recounts the story of her first meeting with Tom, which happened at her hospital, where Tom was brought with decompression sickness after a failed dive. The children weep, remembering their father and saying their final goodbyes to him. At night, Cassie is awakened by a noise and steps outside to sit near the plane. Out of the darkness, the killer approaches her, unaware that the girl is acting as bait. As he prepares to grab her, Julia ambushes him, stabbing the man with a knife. At dawn, the family prepares to continue their journey, only to discover the killer's body has been scavenged. A sign that something even more dangerous than humans lurks in the desert. They move on. Julia consults the map when Ben suddenly rushes ahead. His mother yells for him to stop, but the boy sprints toward a salty puddle and manages to drink a few gulps. Julia drags him away, but the boy becomes sick. Soon they come across some plastic chairs and build a makeshift shelter from the sun, resting inside it. Suddenly, Julia hears strange sounds. She steps outside and sees something that forces her to wake the children. Realizing the new danger, they begin running. Soon they spot a large ship in the distance, surrounded by crashed containers and a few wandering people. Julia calls out to them, but they, seeing thousands of giant crabs, dash into a container and lock the doors, ignoring her pleas for help. The three climb onto a container, though the crabs manage to wound Julia in the leg. Nevertheless, Julia, Cassie, and Ben sit on top, watching the crabs penetrate through a crack in the doors, killing everyone inside despite the people's attempts to fend them off. Julia ties a scarf around her leg and passes out. The next morning, she wakes up alone, terrified, and calls for the children, but it turns out the crabs have moved on, and the children had gone down to search for food and weapons. Julia cauterizes her wound while Ben examines the found weapons. Searching through the containers, they find a small amount of food and water. In the pocket of one of the deceased, Julia finds a radio and contacts Naoto. He responds, explaining that he was also attacked by deep-sea arthropods. Based on his observations, the sea will return soon, which is why the creatures have emerged. Julia begs him to save her children, but she's unsure where to go because she's lost the map. Naoto fires a flare. Ben sees the direction, and the family rushes toward it. Soon they see a yellow submarine in the distance, but reaching it is difficult due to the terrain of the former seabed. Cassie dislikes her mother's talk about saving the children, but Julia refuses to answer and pushes the family onward. They are forced to pass through a canyon contaminated with toxic waste. At one point, they are caught in a rock slide, and Julia becomes separated from the children. She orders them to continue, and when Cassie refuses, Julia pleads with her to save her brother. Cassie and Ben make it out of the canyon and reach the submarine, but inside, there's no one. Suddenly, Naoto, badly wounded, emerges from behind the boat. He admits that he has no chance of surviving and orders them to climb aboard, but Cassie goes back for her mother, who is fending off the emerging crabs. Her bullets nearly depleted, Cassie climbs the rock barrier and extends her hand to her mother. They manage to reach the submarine just as the crabs overrun Naoto, who dies in their claws. The family climbs aboard, and just then an ocean wave crests over the horizon. The water lifts the submarine and drags it across the rocks, and as Julia watches everything that happened over the past few days flash before her eyes, she passes out. When she awakens, she finds the vessel at a standstill. Julia opens the hatch, and the family emerges to find themselves in a ruined city, carried there by the wave. Despite a great concept, the film failed to make an impact, largely due to the many mistakes made by its creators. The film takes place in the small town of Vengenberg, where a young girl named Yennefer lives with a skewed face and a disgusting hump in the family of a cowman. Because of her ugly appearance, the girl is constantly mocked by the locals, and one day when Yennefer is once again mocked by a couple of local young men, the girl accidentally opens a portal to the magical Tor Lara in Aretuza, where she's met by the young wizard Istrid. The guy's concerned. All magic leaves traces which wizards can use to find someone who has even an ounce of magic in them. He decides to save the budding sorceress and opens a safe portal that brings Yennefer home. Time later, a beautiful and wealthy lady arrives at the farm of the girl's father to buy a pig. But upon seeing the girl, she expresses a desire to buy her too. And the father, who does not hide his disgust for his daughter, sells her for half the price of the animal despite the pleas of her mother, who recognizes the lady as a witch. So Yennefer finds herself in the magical school of the enchantress Tissaia of Vries, where several girls are already studying. At first, Yennefer takes the separation from home hard and how low her father judged her. She even tried to commit suicide, but when classes begin, she discovers that the young wizard was right. It was her inadvertent wizardry that caused the wave and caught the attention of the school's rector, the wizardess Tissaia. The girls who study at the school have also distinguished themselves with the same unique skills. Soon Tissaia holds the first test. The girls must lift a stone and a flower without touching them and using a spell. Everyone more or less manages to cope with the task, but Yennefer fails. The girl stubbornly tries again and again until Tissaia stops her. Frustrated, Yennefer runs away. Later, she finds Istredd in the cave and tells him her name. Sometime later, Tissaia trains her female pupils to recognize man's greatest fear. She sees the girls in pairs and orders them to look into each other's eyes until they get inside their rival schemes. Yennefer pairs up to encourage the girl, but she again fails. Tissaia is enraged. Yennefer is useless. And this is because she's lying to herself. Even if she were a beauty, no one would love her. Although she's not the only one to whom she has problems, Yennefer shares the problems with her only friend, Istredd, who talks about her schooling. He too was having a hard time with everything. The boy offers to read his mind, and the girl succeeds. One night, Tissaia wakes the girls in the middle of a storm and takes them to the Tor Lara, the most powerful magic place in the continent, entrance to which is only open to members of the Wizard Brotherhood. Today, there will be a test in the art of controlling the flows of chaos, which requires catching lightning in a bottle. The girls do not believe in such a possibility, and some get strong discharges even after catching the lightning. Yennefer's turn comes, and she reaches up with the bottle, but it is thrown back against the wall. Enraged, she directs her power at her more fortunate opponent, Tissaia, blocking her mental blow. Later, she reprimands her apprentice she almost killed today, which means that her emotions can ruin her own. Tissaia cannot be sure that Yennefer will not go along with her feelings and harm his school, for she's to become a court sorceress, and the weak have no place near a ruler. The enchantress already doubts that there's anything in her that the wizarding chapter needs. Frustrated, Yennefer tells Istredd everything. But most importantly, the enchantress knows all about them and they won't be able to see each other again. The guy is willing to show her other, more ancient and powerful magic, but it is very dangerous. He shows her the skulls of the dead elves who built Aretuza. They were the first wizards of the continent, and they were the ones who built all the magical places. But humans came to the continent and slaughtered them. Istredd gives her a flower that can only grow where the elder blood rests and reads a spell, which by repeating it the girl opens a portal. The astonished wizard does not understand how she managed to do it the first time, and Yennefer confesses that her real father was a half-elf who died in the purge. It was his blood that made her ugly. The boy kisses Yennefer and confesses his love. Later, she shows Tissaia the flower. It turns out that this was her assignment, to get the plant by applying the skills of false emotion. Yennefer hopes to be elevated. The enchantress promises that she will soon hear a knock and know when it is time. Meanwhile, Istredd is also reporting to his mentor Stregobor about what he has learned about the girl. One night, Yennefer hears a knock at her neighbor's door and, taking the flower, goes after them. She peeks out as Tissaia turns the four of them into eels. The enchantress knows the girl is here and orders her to come out and push her former fellow students into the water. They are now the conduits of magic for Aretuza. Yennefer performs this and then sees many silhouettes of former schoolmates in the water. Time passes. Yennefer enjoys a love affair with Istredd, applying what she has learned to enhance the effect of intimacy. Thus, one day she created a whole crowd that watched her intimacy and then rewarded the lovers with applause. The guy is amazed at her imagination. What will she come up with next time? So the day of the final rite is approaching, after which they will be masters of their own destiny. Yennefer dreams of graduating from Aretuza and returning to her native Aedirn as a powerful sorceress to show her longtime abusers and her father what she's been able to achieve. In addition, all Aretuza graduates are perfected before being sent to the different kingdoms. All physical defects are removed, which awaits Yennefer as well. The wizard in charge shows her his work, the flawless beauty of the graduates, and promises her an equally wonderful result. He suggests making her color a noble but strong gray. Tisai, on the other hand, teaches her to look in the mirror and see what Yennefer herself wants. She orders the girl to close her eyes and imagine the most powerful woman in the world. Yennefer complies with the order but does not yet see the promised beauty. Meanwhile, the chapter of wizards gathers in Aretuza to decide where their graduates should go, for all kings need court wizards. Then it transpires that one of the leaders of the council, the wizard Stregobor, knows that Yennefer is a quarter elf, which means that she will not be accepted at Aretuza, where there is a prejudice against elves. The chapter vows to send Yennefer to Nilfgaard, which the aspiring enchanter does not like. She demands an audience with the chapter, but Tisai declares herself in charge of the distribution. Yennefer is beside herself. She has no intention of wasting her life serving the king of a small southern kingdom and a lover of women. The tutor reminds her of the elven blood, and the girl understands how Stregobor knew about it. The initiation ceremony begins, which Yennefer does not attend. Worried, Istrid finds her behind a letter to her father asking him to confirm that she's his own daughter. The boy does not believe that this letter can convince the chapter. But the girl simply does not know what to do, for even if Istrid disproves his words about her origins, no one will believe him anymore. The enchanter is frustrated. He didn't know why Stregobor needed this information, and she has already missed all the initiation spells. Istrid suggests that she should go with him, for he has been offered to become an explorer. They can travel the continent and discover the unknowable. But unexpectedly, the girl cruelly ridicules his plan. She's not going to dig through the dust of the ages at all, and these are his dreams and intentions, and her opinion, as always, he does not even ask. Istrid is shocked. Yennefer is not at all what he thought she was, and he expresses his opinion that she's angry because she missed her chance to find beauty. But a girl needs power, and she didn't experience so much hardship studying at the magic school for nothing. Yennefer runs to the enchanter, who is in charge of perfection, and demands to show her art. Not even the lack of a potion to dull the terrible pain that accompanies the transformation process stops her. As the magician begins the process, Yennefer asks for her eyes and the cut marks on her hands as a reminder of her former weakness. And the wizard informs her that every magic has a price. Having been reborn, she will not be able to walk. But the girl agrees to everything, even to the removal of her womb necessary for a complete transformation. The magician reads spells, and the girl screams in terrible pain and rips the chains with which she was tied to the table. Her spine straightens, her entire body seems to melt and shift from one form to another. Finally, writhing in pain, Yennefer loses consciousness. Meanwhile, in the main hall of Aretuza, the initiation ball continues. Suddenly, Tisai sees a door opening in which stands an unusually beautiful girl with violet eyes. She realizes that Yennefer has disobeyed her orders and hurries to take her away. But it is too late. The Aedirn ruler has already noticed the beauty. He invites her to a dance where he expresses his desire to see her as court wizard in his kingdom. Tisai has to retreat and only watch the dance of the king and the enchantress from afar. Directed based on a series of books by Sapkowski, The Witcher is quite curious, fascinating and vivid. The atmosphere of magic, the world of monsters and steel swords transferred quite well, so the adventures of the female protagonist will be even more exciting in the next episodes. The spaceship is on a mission to Titan, one of Saturn's moons. Astronaut John wakes up in the hibernation capsule. He feels weak after the long sleep. The drugs have many side effects and John needs some time to recover. He is greeted by the ship's captain, Franks. The captain orders John to take a shower and then come up to the bridge to discuss the next steps. Besides Captain Franks, John is met by his colleague Nash. Together the men watch a message from the Mission Control Center and receive new instructions. They are to conduct routine equipment checks and prepare for gravitational acceleration. John tries to pull himself together, but this time he feels worse. He struggles to eat and confesses to Nash that he can't remember the last name of Zoe, his girlfriend. By evening, John manages to check all the equipment. He records a response message to Mission Control, reports the situation, and prepares for another hibernation cycle, which will last 3 more months. A special substance is injected into the astronaut's bloodstream, and his eyes slowly close. Memories from the past wash over him, and for the next 3 months, he is deep in sleep. The awakening process is routine, with John experiencing the usual symptoms as he waits for his body to recover. After a hearty meal, the astronaut spends some time on the exercise bike, preparing for work, but unexpectedly he hears a familiar voice. It seems like Zoe's voice came from somewhere nearby. John steps into the corridor and walks through the empty spaceship. No one else has woken up from deep sleep yet, and John feels uneasy. His fear intensifies when part of the ship's hull above him starts to come loose. John tries to figure out what's wrong, but a piece of metal breaks off and knocks him unconscious. Captain Franks and Nash lay their injured colleague down and provide medical assistance. As soon as John feels better, the captain orders him to go to the technical compartment and figure out what caused the malfunction. Under the hull, John finds significant damage and a strange giant dent, but the footage Nash reviews from the cameras provides no answers. No objects approached the ship in the past few hours. Moreover, the dent hasn't caused any serious problems. All systems are still functioning normally. Captain Franks leaves his subordinates and orders them to report the situation to Earth. He himself heads to the site of the damage for another inspection. Nash tries to convince the captain to abort the mission and return to Earth, but Franks refuses to break protocol. There's no serious reason to do so, as all systems are still operating smoothly. The astronauts gather to make a joint decision, but the conflict only escalates. Nash starts panicking, insisting that continuing the mission is too dangerous, but the captain remains firm. Unless new orders come from Mission Control, they will continue toward Titan. Nash then tries to persuade John to act together. He's convinced the system will eventually fail, and by then, they won't have the chance to save themselves and return to Earth. Their conversation is interrupted by the captain, who calls them to the bridge. He admits that he overheard everything Nash said and doesn't appreciate his attempts to stir up panic. Franks tries to calm Nash down, reminding him of the consequences they'll face for disobeying orders and advising them to focus on their duties. Despite the captain's orders, Nash continues to urge John. He asks him to set the hibernation cycle for 89 days instead of 90 so they can wake up earlier than the captain and reverse course back to Earth. John doesn't like his friend's idea and doesn't want to be part of a mutiny, but when Nash tells him about another ship destroyed by poor leadership decisions, John agrees to think it over and give an answer after they wake up. John falls asleep again, recalling happy moments with Zoe, but this time the cycle is much shorter than usual. Nash demands an answer from his friends so they can quickly turn the ship around and head for Earth, but John remains uncertain. He realizes that his mind is clouded, and making important decisions in this state isn't wise. Jupiter appears outside the window, strengthening John's doubts. They are so close to their destination. This drives Nash over the edge, and a loud argument breaks out between the men. Captain Franks watches the whole scene. Having learned of his subordinates' plans, he also altered his sleep schedule and woke up earlier to prevent the mutineers from disrupting the mission. Franks sends Nash to check the systems again to make sure everything is in order. While the saboteur is gone, the captain invites John for a drink to gauge the astronaut's mood. The commander assures John that he'll cancel the mission if it's necessary, but for now they must stick together and follow orders. Nash's derailed plans push him to the brink of insanity. He causes a scene and Franks decides to relieve him of his duties and proceed with acceleration without him. John tries to stay out of the conflict and pretends that everything is fine, but the breach in the hull continues to trouble him, and he often has nightmares where it pulls him into the vacuum of space. Despite his concerns, John ignores Nash's pleas and heads to the bridge to prepare for the acceleration. The team gets ready to approach Jupiter. John sets the coordinates and sequentially activates the powerful engines that will take them to Titan. The acceleration is successful, and the ship enters the orbit that will guide them to Titan. But Nash still believes it's a serious mistake. John isn't entirely sure they made the right choice either, but he tries to keep himself busy to avoid dwelling on it. He decides to check the equipment again, and something strange happens. One of the radios transmits an unknown signal. The crew tries to come up with an explanation, both insisting that John must have accidentally pressed a button. To end the discussion, Franks orders the astronauts to prepare for another hibernation cycle. This time, exiting hibernation becomes a real challenge. John collapses to the floor, completely drained. He tries to recover, but while his body regains strength, his mind suffers greatly. He keeps seeing visions of Zoe everywhere. Captain Franks notices his subordinate's strange condition. He tells John to get a grip and realize that it's all just his imagination. Zoe is not, and cannot be on the ship. Nash discovers the first signs of trouble. The reactor's power output begins to rise. He's not sure if it's connected to the hull breach, but if it continues, the ship's engine might fail. Nash again urges his friend to listen to him and turn the ship around. He reminds John of Zoe, saying that if they don't return now, she'll quickly find a new boyfriend. Captain Franks overhears the men's conversation once again. He summons them to the bridge for a serious talk. Someone, using Nash's password, deliberately lowered the engine's power to stop the ship. The commander won't tolerate Nash's antics any longer. This time he draws his sidearm to show the mutineer who's in charge on the ship. Franks orders the astronauts to return to their hibernation capsules to prevent any further sabotage. But as John's body starts receiving the drug, he sees what the captain is doing to his colleague. He doesn't have time to stop the crime. His eyes close. Weeks later, when the sleep cycle ends, John tries to figure out if it really happened or if it was just a dream. He steps into the corridor, but none of his colleagues are around. Franks appears suddenly. He assures John that Nash is fine but will remain in hibernation until the mission is over. The captain asks John not to complicate things and behave normally. They need to complete the mission and reach Titan, but if necessary, he'll use his sidearm to prevent further insubordination. To help John relax, Franks tells him the truth about the other ships Nash mentioned. He swears the madman distorted the facts, and in that case the captain wasn't at fault. The crew harmed themselves. John reluctantly admits he was wrong and agrees to continue working together. The captain tasks him with inspecting the equipment and re-establishing contact with Mission Control on Earth. While working, John's arm goes numb, and he tries to examine it himself, but for a moment it seems like the limb swells and turns into a monstrous hand. As soon as the vision disappears, John hears Zoe's voice again, but he realizes this is also a hallucination and doesn't respond to the call. Instead, John decides to discuss the future plans with the captain, but Franks unexpectedly starts talking about John's relationship with his girlfriend. The commander assures him that their romance wasn't real. It was orchestrated to convince John to join the mission. The unpleasant conversation unsettles John, and he heads to the workshop to focus on his tasks. Unpleasant thoughts and memories prevent John from concentrating, but suddenly the radio crackles, and he hears the dispatcher's voice. The astronaut tries to report what's happening, but the connection keeps cutting out and he can't hear a response. Franks summons John to the bridge. He demands to know what John was doing, and upon hearing about the conversation with Houston, the captain insists it was another hallucination. The captain orders John to return to his capsule and go back to sleep, but this time John's nerves snap. He demands that Franks wake Nash up and prove that his friend is okay. Taking advantage of a moment, Franks attacks John and tries to force him into the capsule, but John manages to break free. A fight breaks out between the two men. John is stronger, but he can't win the battle with his mind as easily as with the captain. John reaches the central computer to find out which chamber Nash is in and if he's alive. While entering the request, he has to fend off Franks, but finally, the computer starts searching for the astronaut. The answer John receives leaves him in shock. The program confirms that Nash is alive and on the bridge, just like John and Franks, because all three names belong to the same person, Captain John Franks Nash. John realizes that he's been alone on the ship the entire time. His companions were figments of his imagination caused by the repeated use of hibernation drugs. John loses his last bit of strength and doesn't know what to do next. He returns to the workshop, holding the service pistol. The astronaut tries to contact Mission Control again, but for a long time the radios remain silent. Finally, one of the radios turns on, and John hears Zoe's voice. She says she's at the ground control center and was invited to speak to him. Zoe confirms John's version. The hibernation drugs were too strong, causing his mind to become confused. But that's not the worst part. The girl tells the astronaut that there's no spaceship. All this time, he's been part of a different experiment in deep underground. The planets and stars he saw through the window were just a simulation, as was the sensation of flying. But the impact was real. An earthquake hit the surface, partially collapsing the tunnel. Zoe asks her fiancé to gather his strength and help them rescue him. To do that, John needs to depressurize the cargo bay and leave the ship. She assures him that outside, there's an underground corridor leading to the surface. Captain Franks reappears behind John, trying to stop him. He claims that Zoe's voice is just another hallucination, and the story about underground tunnels and earthquakes is a fantasy his mind made up to explain the situation. Franks tells John that if he depressurizes the cargo bay, all that awaits outside is the vacuum of space, which will pull him out and end his life. John hesitates briefly, but Zoe's voice gives him strength. He doesn't listen to the captain and opens the airlock. At first it seems like Zoe was right. John finds himself in a shaft and hears her voice nearby. He walks toward the light, hoping to soon reach the surface. But space engulfs the astronaut's body and carries him into the infinite void. Or was that a hallucination too? That's how the movie ends. Japan 2023. People board a train and head to work. Everyone is busy with their own things, scrolling through Instagram feeds, making acquaintances on social networks, and discussing plans for the evening, unaware that in just a few minutes, their lives will change forever. Suddenly, the train's speed increases, and strange things start happening. A bottle cap rolling on the floor of the carriage suddenly disappears. Passengers begin receiving alerts about powerful earthquakes on their phones. Then the train enters a gloomy tunnel and comes to a sudden halt. People regain consciousness, bewildered by what has happened. One of the passengers opens the entrance doors, and people, screaming and pushing each other, rush to the exit, jumping from the high steps. But once outside, they can't believe their eyes. Traces of the civilized world are gone, and they are surrounded by the remnants of a destroyed city, overgrown with trees and grass. Moreover, all the carriages have disappeared without a trace, except for the fifth one they were in. As time passes, the passengers begin to get acquainted. One of the guys, Shirahama, a firefighter, examines the injured and suggests checking the tunnel behind the carriage. He is joined by a girl named Katana and a guy named Hayashima, who also wants to understand what happened. Meanwhile, the police in the city cannot figure out where the last two carriages have gone, while the rest of the train, along with the passengers, remains undamaged. The three volunteers enter the tunnel and walk through the dark underworld for a long time. Suddenly, they notice a light ahead and hurry towards it, but when they emerge outside, they are astonished. There is nothing around that would remind them of the year 2023 with skyscrapers and technology, just a vast, lifeless desert. Shocked, the trio returns to their fellow misfortune mates. Initially, people do not believe their report, but after Hayashima shows a video recording of the surroundings, they are forced to accept the new reality. After 7 hours, people languish in anticipation of rescuers, when one of the girls, Reni, secretly looks into Hayashima's bag and finds a letter marked with the criminal department's seals, leading her to suspect that the guy's a criminal. Then Reni snatches food from Katana's bag, but, thinking she was seen, discards the package. Hayashima picks it up and carries it to the train, just as Katana discovers the theft. Seeing it in the guy's hands, the passengers accuse him of theft. Moreover, Reni reports about the letter from the colony. Offended, Hayashima denies the accusations and announces his departure. At this time, Shirahama pulls out a box of fruits and offers to share them. While Katana is distributing the food, one of the guys reviews the video he made earlier, clearly showing Reni stealing the food. Realizing that Hayashima is innocent, Shirahama and Katana run after him, managing to save the guy who nearly falls into a deep ditch. In gratitude, he confesses that he works as a hairdresser and is already 30 years old. But he refuses to explain the origin of the letter from the colony. Night falls. Passengers somehow settle down to sleep, but many cannot sleep, worrying about their future. In the morning, people begin to realize that they may never return home. Shirahama tries to gather the scattering people, but a friend asks the guide not to take responsibility for others' lives. Then the firefighter confesses that because of him, his colleague was injured, losing the ability to walk. Now he believes he must help everyone he can. Together, they catch up with those who left and persuade them to return to the carriage to solve problems collectively. Seeing this, Hayashima remembers his brother who was in prison, and the letter in his bag was from him. Fate had it that he had to take on the upbringing of his younger brother, and he still feels guilty for his older brother becoming a criminal. Meanwhile, a couple of passengers explore the surrounding area and find the ruins of a high tower. This is particularly strange because the news reported its construction, which was supposed to be completed in 2026. And one of the passengers found a can in the forest dated that year. A biologist among them encountered a plant whose genetic modification takes 30 years. It turns out that they are in the distant future of Earth, and it's far from a joyful discovery. At the same time in 2023, all channels are broadcasting messages about the disappearance of two carriages, which had at least 100 passengers. Night approaches and many fall into despair, while Katana and Shirahama place plastic containers on the roof of the carriage, hoping for rain. In the morning, the biologist draws the others' attention to the dense greenery, which means there must be a body of water nearby. A group of youth sets out to explore the forest. Along the way, Hayashima confesses that his parents are criminals, and then the guy spots a frog. This means water is very close, but ahead are impassable cliffs, which can only be climbed with the help of ropes. The group returns to the train and cutting wires heads back to the cliffs. Shirahama climbs to the top and joyfully shouts upon seeing a waterfall, but looking around he is horrified. Instead of Mount Fuji, a sea stretches out before him. Returning, he tells the others about this, and people start to speculate what happened to their planet. At night, everyone goes to sleep, but the eldest passenger, Tanaka, goes outside and sees an unfamiliar person. But when he tells about it, no one believes him. Then it starts to rain, helping people to collect water and even bathe. Meanwhile, the biologist continues to study the surrounding fauna, finds several edible plants, and shows them to the others. And still, Katana manages to eat a poisonous berry, but fortunately, her poisoning is not fatal. The news that the girl has recovered has a sobering effect on the passengers. They finally realize that sitting still, they won't survive. People get to work and even make utensils from bamboo. Bank cards turn out to be decent knives. The group of youths brings water from the waterfall, and they prepare a soup from plants. But after dinner, some feel sick and the biologist discovers a couple of poisonous berries in the common pot. Someone remembers seeing Tanaka near the pot, who is not among them. Shirahama sets out to look for him, but stumbles, falls, and loses his torch. After a while, Shirahama returns without Tanaka, but with Hayashima's previously lost barber tools, which he had sorely missed. In the morning, the biologist announces to the people that he is going to look for a river which should be nearby. His friends go with him. But in the forest, they encounter a stranger who injures the biologist and runs away. The guys carry him back to the train, where fortunately there is a medical student who provides the injured with first aid. The others help as much as they can and pray for the guy. Later, Tanaka unexpectedly returns from the forest. It turns out he worked for a security company and can show how to make traps around the camp. Reni asks Hayashima to fix her hair, and soon there's a queue for the guy. Meanwhile, Shirahama and Katana notice a teenager caught in one of the traps, but the youngster gets out on his own and runs away. The friends hurry after him and soon find themselves by the river, but the boy asks them to wait for him at the spot and disappears into the forest. Hayashima, noticing their disappearance, catches up with the pair. At this time, the teenager returns and leads the friends to carriage number 6, which mysteriously ended up several kilometers away from the 5th carriage. The passengers from the 5th carriage are welcomed by the leader of the group from the 6th carriage, Yumamoto. Their carriage was lucky to be near the river, where there was plenty of fresh water and fish. Moreover, among them was a builder who, under his guidance, they were able to quickly set up a camp and even build a kitchen and a toilet. The newcomers find the one who injured their biologist. He confesses that he did it out of fear, thinking they were going to attack him. He bows deeply, apologizing for his action. And Yumamoto admits that he believes a return to the past is possible. The man told them that in the early days, they found a small boat on the river, where he managed to fix the radio and catch a signal, apparently from Canada, where the year 2060 was mentioned. From what he heard, the man understood that in 2026 a disaster occurred. A huge asteroid fell to Earth, causing powerful earthquakes and tsunamis worldwide, instantly taking billions of lives. The dust thrown into the atmosphere blocked sunlight, leading to the extinction of the remaining species. But the main thing is that the asteroid didn't fall by chance. It was space debris, as besides state corporations, satellites began to be launched by anyone who fancied. One of the probes collided with a satellite, which in turn fell onto an asteroid, leading to a deviation of its orbit. So it was a man-made disaster. That's why it's so important to return to their year and change the future. Inspired by the example of the 6th carriage, the passengers decided to make a bath by the river. Meanwhile, Tanaka continues to deteriorate, making himself a doll from branches and talking to it. In the morning, the bath is ready. For the first time in many days, people bathe in hot water and wash their clothes. And the guys find a strange stone on the riverbank, which Yumamoto learns about. He sends his people to find it, but Rennie notices strangers, and one of the guys lets slip that according to their leader, this stone might help them return home. The girls argue about the need to return, and Rennie pushes Katana away. She falls and accidentally shifts a layer of soil under which a dead body is discovered. Meanwhile, Tanaka reads in a newspaper an announcement about the search for a murderer in his description. At that time, Rennie and Katana are attacked by guys from the 6th carriage, but Rennie breaks free and runs to her own, where she tells about the found corpse, while Katana escapes from the guys through the forest. The 5th carriage decides to make weapons, while Shirahama and Hayashima run to the neighbors. But the girl is not there, and Katana meanwhile makes it to the boat. Yumamoto is forced to confess to the guys that he killed one of the passengers, who suddenly became aggressive and started attacking people with a knife. That's why he was recognized as a leader. The guys go home, hoping that Katana has returned, but she's not there, and the rest urge to go to the 6th carriage and punish the guilty. And the guys go again to look for the girl. Katana hides in the boat when Yumamoto comes in. He pretends to be calling an unknown station, but the girl sees that the wires are cut. The man discovers her and confesses that he doesn't want to return to the past because he intends to create a new society here. After that, he ties up Katana and locks her in the cabin, where her screams cannot be heard. In the morning, the passengers of the 5th carriage are just about to attack the neighbors when one of the women suggests backing up and looking for a building where they could hide. At this time, guys from the 6th carriage go to the neighbors to scavenge something, but they fall into traps. A fight starts when the rest of the 6th carriage's passengers arrive, and there are more men among them. The fight escalates into a real battle, which is stopped by the appearance of the escaped Katana, who accuses Yumamoto of lying. He is forced to admit to the deception, but he just wanted to keep people's spirits up. However, the passengers decide to exile the former leader. Before leaving, the man hands over a journal from the ship, which contains information about the tower that could help them return to the past. Meanwhile, those who went to search for the building reach the tower and find glowing asteroid fragments there. And in 2023, scientist Ray, after reviewing the video surveillance camera recordings, discovers that a wormhole appeared in the tunnel at the moment of the disappearance of 2 carriages, which apparently was the result of a distortion in the space-time continuum. The passengers study the journal found by Yumamoto and learn the exact date of the disaster. Moreover, they have an asteroid fragment that possesses a phenomenal magnetic charge. One of the passengers remembers how on the day of their departure, he saw something in the sky resembling a falling star. In the past, Ray, analyzing the same event, concludes that it was the flare from a supernova explosion. In the future, there's also an expert who explains that supernovas occur in space when a star reaches the end of its life cycle and explodes, releasing a massive amount of energy. Apparently, this created the temporal rift into which both carriages fell. It means they need to open this wormhole again. In the evening, a strong storm begins, forcing people to seek more reliable shelter than the carriage. Tanaka opens the rear doors leading into the tunnel. Unexpectedly, a strong gust snatches his doll and sucks it into the wormhole caused by the hurricane. But as soon as the storm subsides, the wormhole disappears. And in 2023, scientists find Tanaka's doll. Passengers in the future conclude that to summon the wormhole, they need a powerful energy source, for which they start looking for remnants of power lines. Digging up each post, the passengers find an electrical substation where, somehow, working equipment is preserved. They redirect enough electricity into the tunnel to stabilize the wormhole with the onset of the next storm, enough to return to the past. The storm starts at night, supported by the power of the substation. The wormhole opens, and everyone enters the carriage except Tanaka, who refused to return. The carriage is swallowed by the hole and races somewhere in space and time until its doors are opened by security service employees who say they have arrived on May 1, 2026, which means there are only a few months left before the asteroid falls. After going through quarantine procedures, the passengers tell the officials, presenting as evidence fragments of the meteorite and unusual plants from the future. Only the officials don't believe the stories about the upcoming apocalypse. Later, the internet buzzes about the incident. The time travelers find fans, which helps maintain interest in the traveler's story about the upcoming end of the world. Meanwhile, scientist Ray becomes convinced that the travelers are telling the truth, as he has also tracked the asteroid. One of the passengers posts an appeal on the internet telling ordinary people about the impending danger, and a passenger who held a high position in the government before the trip makes her way to the Minister of Defense. She listens to her former colleague and reports that the government believed them and is already preparing to launch a missile capable of altering the asteroid's trajectory to pass by Earth. Time passes, and the day of the catastrophe is about to dawn. The travelers decide to gather together on the platform to find out whether it was possible to avert the disaster, and if not, to perish together. But the military successfully completes their task and changes the meteorite's trajectory, saving humanity from total extinction. Quite an unusual series where various theories about the impending doom of humanity are mixed. And the finale of the story is very relevant, emphasizing that life on Earth is the result of the actions of each living being, and the future of the planet is a collective human responsibility.
Furiosa lives with her tribe in a green oasis amidst an arid desert. One day, she and her friend go out to gather fruits. Suddenly, the girl notices strangers in the forest. She sneaks up to their motorcycles and disables one of them. However, when she moves to the next bike, the girl is spotted. Furiosa blows the whistle that her tribe uses to signal danger and starts running. However, the girl is captured, tied up, and taken away. But her signal was heard. The entire tribe rushes to her rescue, and the girl's mother, Mary, arms herself, mounts a horse, and gives chase. Mary pursues the kidnappers for a long time, eventually catching up to and killing the slowest one. She then takes his motorcycle and continues the chase. Soon, another bandit's motorcycle breaks down. Two others stop to check for pursuers. During this time, Furiosa bites through the fuel line of the motorcycle. Her captor doesn't notice this, and seeing the pursuit on the horizon, the bandits ride on. Meanwhile, Furiosa's mother finds the second bandit's motorcycle and switches to it. As evening falls, the bandits stop to check their bikes. They realize the pursuit isn't far behind. One suggests abandoning the girl, but another reminds them of their low status. Bringing the captive girl back would raise their standing in the gang. While they argue, Furiosa manages to free her legs and runs away, but the bandits notice and catch up with her. Morning comes as Mary catches up with the kidnappers. She sees them through the scope of her rifle, but shooting now is risky, as they are close to the bandit camp. Nevertheless, she shoots one. The other bandit, however, has secured Furiosa to his back, making it too risky for her to shoot. The bandit rides into the camp, sparking a dispute among the biker gang members, each wanting the girl for themselves. However, her captor claims he has seen a place of abundance, causing excitement among the crowd. The bandits decide to take the girl to their leader, Dementus. Mary follows them. On the way, Furiosa manages to push her captor off the motorcycle, preventing him from revealing the oasis's location. Dementus tries to intimidate the girl, but she remains silent. The bandit then resorts to trickery, ordering her to be washed and fed, promising to send her home the next day. Meanwhile, Mary disguises herself in the clothes of the last bandit she shot and heads to Dementus's camp. Furiosa is taken to a tent where a servant cleans her up. Seeing Mary in a helmet, the servant gets scared and begs not to be harmed, promising not to raise the alarm. Mary spares her, but as soon as mother and daughter leave, the servant runs to the warriors. A chase quickly ensues following the tracks of Mary's and Furiosa's motorcycle. Realizing they can't escape together, Mary orders her daughter to ride away. As a parting gift, she gives her a peach seed and makes Furiosa promise to plant it and protect the green lands. Furiosa rides away but stops and watches as her mother fights Dementus's hordes. Mary fights bravely, but cannot overcome all of them and is captured. The girl, crying, runs to her and manages to see Dementus's men brutally executing her mother. Dementus promises to release both if the girl shows the way to the oasis, but Furiosa only cries in grief. Dementus takes the girl and locks her in a cage. She is forced to watch the bloody competitions Dementus loves to hold. He tries to appease the girl and even gives her his favorite teddy bear. Dementus's history specialist offers to teach her to read and write, suggesting she could become a historian, but she plans to escape back to the Greenlands, tattooing the path onto her arm. One day, Dementus and his horde, searching for the place of abundance, encounter a strange warrior who claims to have come from the Citadel, where there is everything. Dementus decides this must be the land they seek and heads in that direction.
Soon they reach the impregnable fortress guarded by the army of Immortan Joe. Dementus delivers a fiery speech, trying to rally the common people to his side. However, the Citadel's leader offers to choose one of his warriors to begin the battle. Dementus' servant points to one of Immortan Joe's soldiers. The soldier takes up his weapon, says goodbye, and jumps into the midst of the biker warriors, where he detonates himself, taking many enemies with him. But Dementus cannot retreat. The battle begins. Immortan Joe's men skillfully capture Dementus' motorcycles and cars with hook chains, lifting them into the air. They do this with Furiosa's cage as well, but the history specialist manages to latch onto the cage, and Dementus himself comes to help. They free the girl from the cage and flee. Sometime later, Dementus rebuilds his horde and plans to capture one of Immortan Joe's military bases, Gastown. First, he stops a fuel tanker headed for the town and forces his people to disguise themselves as Citadel warriors. Disguised as Joe's men, they head to the town, whose guards, at the last moment, open the gates for the suspicious convoy. Dementus' men capture Gastown and now can dictate terms to Immortan Joe. Learning of this, the Citadel leader agrees to negotiations where the bikers demand tribute in the form of supplies. Dementus' people display the head of Gastown's leader, threatening to impale it with an iron spike if Immortan Joe does not meet the bikers' demands. Realizing he cannot defeat the bikers outright, Joe agrees to consider their demands, but he notices Furiosa in the crowd. Seeing his interest, Dementus claims the girl as his daughter, but for the first time in a long while, Furiosa speaks and accuses Dementus of killing her mother. Eventually, Immortan Joe allows Dementus to rule Gastown, promising to supply the bikers with some food and water in exchange for Furiosa and the biker gang's mechanic. Angered, Dementus takes the teddy bear from the girl. Furiosa is taken to a room where Immortan Joe's women rest. On this day, one of his wives gives birth, but the child is again born a mutant. While the girl watches, one of Joe's warriors, Rictus, notices the bells in her hair. Realizing she has caught his interest, Furiosa cuts off her hair and makes a wig with the bells that night. Later, Rictus takes her to his quarters, where he examines her and finds the star tattoo on her arm leading to her home. But, fascinated by the jingling hair, he starts to stroke it. The girl twists away, leaves the wig in his hands, and escapes. Sometime later, Furiosa, who managed to trick her way into a crane operator brigade, earns praise as a fearless boy who lost his voice in one of the wars. No one can even imagine she is a girl, not a tough mute boy. Only Rictus once notices her familiar eyes, but doesn't have time to understand as construction begins on a well-armed supply truck to withstand raider attacks in the lawless wasteland. Considering the situation, the girl plans to escape, hiding a motorcycle and supplies under the main truck. Sometime later, during another trip along Fury Road to the fuel farm, the truck is attacked by marauders who left Dementus' gang. The truck's guards engage in battle, which takes place while moving. The Separatists use everything, including parachutes, to capture the vehicles. Taking advantage of this, Furiosa descends under the truck to free the motorcycle from its chains. During this time, a technician descends to replace a part of the damaged hose but falls, managing to pass Furiosa a spare part. One of the attackers approaches the truck and attaches explosives to its underside. Furiosa saves the truck and, risking her life, fixes the breakdown. The Separatists don't relent, and the driver does everything to shake off the pursuers, but they are persistent, and almost all the guards are killed. Furiosa climbs onto the truck's hood, her helmet is knocked off, and the driver, Praetorian Jack, realizes she is a girl. Furiosa climbs into the cab, and together with Jack, they fend off the remaining Separatists. In the end, all the military guards are killed, leaving only Jack in the truck, Furiosa, and a mutant who, at her command, releases spiked balls, destroying the flying vehicle, but dying himself. The girl returns to the cab and tries to kill Jack, but he throws her off the truck and leaves her on the road. However, he later returns and offers to create a new convoy with her, respecting her bravery. Furiosa becomes Jack's deputy and receives the title of Praetorian. Meanwhile, Dementus, with his inability to manage, practically destroys Gastown's infrastructure, leading to worker dissatisfaction. Realizing no better opportunity will come, Jack proposes they flee, providing Furiosa with everything needed. However, they make another trip and find chaos, which Dementus unsuccessfully tries to quell. Realizing he cannot succeed, Dementus calls a council at the Citadel and orders the truck to leave, leaving supplies behind. Learning of this, Immortan Joe becomes enraged and orders Furiosa and Jack to collect weapons and ammunition in Leadtown. That evening, Jack confesses to Furiosa that he wants to help her because he still remembers his parents. The girl shows him the star map on her arm and offers to leave with her. During their last trip, Jack orders the crew to load the tanker with everything necessary and has Furiosa drive the escort vehicle. However, when the truck arrives in Leadtown, they fall into an ambush. Jack sends a signal ordering Furiosa to flee while he leads the enemy away. But driven by revenge, the girl opens fire with a sniper rifle, trying to kill Dementus. Seeing her, the biker leader fires a grenade launcher at her. Jack, thinking she is dead, destroys the tower where Dementus is hiding. Hanging on the edge, Dementus manages to see Furiosa saving Jack from the abyss where the truck fell and driving away with him on a motorcycle. The pair reach their vehicle left outside the gates and drive off. A surviving Dementus gives chase. On the way, Furiosa tells Jack the route to the place of abundance. Meanwhile, Dementus' men catch up with them. Jack tries to stop the pursuers by firing a rifle, but their vehicle is forced off the road. Furiosa and Jack are dragged out. Enraged, Dementus orders both to be killed, but Jack must die first. Furiosa is chained and forced to watch as they torment her friend. But as evening falls, Dementus sees a hand hanging from a chain with a star map. The girl has cut off her own arm and is now riding away on a stolen motorcycle. With her last strength, she reaches the Citadel where she is taken to Joe. The girl recounts everything that happened and helps plan the war against Dementus. Through trickery, they convince Dementus that the warriors have left the Citadel for Gastown, and the Horde rushes to the fortress where most of the bikers perish. In the meantime, Furiosa, having lost her way home, shaves her head, replaces her hand with a mechanical prosthesis, and prepares for battle. She seizes a vehicle the Praetorians prepared for pursuing Dementus and sets off alone. Meanwhile, Dementus and a few loyal followers try to flee, but Furiosa catches up with him in the desert. Dementus orders his companions to scatter in different directions to throw off the pursuer, but the girl confidently follows his tracks, killing his aides one by one. After a long chase, she finally catches Dementus in the desert. He lies down before her in submission but mocks her, saying revenge will not heal her. Furiosa chains him and reminds him of her murdered mother, but he suddenly confesses that he became this way after his wife and children were killed. He reminds her that no amount of his suffering will bring back her loved ones, and he has a very high pain threshold. Furiosa beats him, but soon realizes he is right. Revenge does not alleviate the pain of loss. When Dementus loses consciousness, she takes his teddy bear, and he finally recognizes her and proposes they join forces to conquer the wasteland. But the girl throws away the toy. A voiceover narrates that Furiosa imprisoned Dementus in the Citadel, using his living body as fertilizer to grow a peach tree from her mother's seeds. Later, she receives command of a new truck, hiding 5 of Immortan Joe's wives who want to escape from him. The new Mad Max movie is filled with fury and a thirst for revenge. It has an excess of harsh and unpleasant scenes, but it also has its philosophy, soul, and hope that even in the most unbearable conditions and the harshest trials, one can remain human and stay true to their goal. Los Angeles, October 6th. For Mark Benford, the day begins as usual. After kissing his wife and young daughter Charlie goodbye, the FBI agent prepares for work and meets Nicole, the young nanny who looks after the girl. Olivia is also getting ready for her shift at the nearby clinic, but before leaving, she dials the number of her assistant, Bryce. However, at that moment, he arrives at the pier, intending to take his own life. At work, Mark and his partner Dimitri begin surveillance of a suspect. When the woman is joined by accomplices, the agents start a pursuit. The suspects notice the surveillance, leading to a high-speed chase. At the pier, Bryce prepares to pull the trigger while the entire city remains unaware of what is about to happen. Mark takes a sharp turn and something strange happens. His entire life flashes before his eyes. In this vision, the agent sees a board with clues and connections, and then he hides from bandits who have come after him. Coming to his senses, Mark realizes that he wasn't the only one who blacked out. Chaos ensues around him. Hundreds of cars have collided, and people are frantically trying to find help. The agents spot the suspect's car and head towards it. Only the woman remains alive, but she babbles something nonsensical about frightened horses. Mark leaves Dimitri by the car and rushes to his wife to check on her. As he runs through the streets, he realizes the situation is much more serious. The blackout affected the entire city and caused widespread destruction. Olivia informs her husband that hundreds of injured people are being brought to the hospital. She ends the call and attends to a patient, a boy involved in an accident. Amazingly, the teenager recognizes Olivia and calls her by name. At the bureau, the staff is urgently gathered, and Stan Wadek reports the first piece of information. People around the world lost consciousness. It is evident that millions of people died because of the blackout. But Mark is concerned about something else. He admits that he didn't just lose consciousness. During that time, it felt as though he was transported 6 months into the future, to April 29th, and he clearly saw what would happen to him on that day. His colleagues support him, and everyone shares their visions. Only Dmitri remains silent. During the blackout, he saw nothing. Mark and Dmitri organize a board to collect clues, and Benford recognizes it as the one from his vision. He mentions a name that stuck with him, D. Gibbons. According to him, this name is where the investigation should begin. Olivia hesitates, but eventually decides to tell her husband about her vision. She saw herself happy, but with another man. Mark convinces himself that it might just be an illusion, but his vision starts to come true that same evening. Charlie gives her father a bracelet that he saw on his wrist. Olivia has to take Charlie to the clinic so she won't be left alone. While she revives her daughter's favorite toy, Lloyd, the father of the injured boy. Dylan enters the room. The doctor is horrified to recognize Lloyd as the man from her vision, but he doesn't recognize her. In his memory, he didn't see his companion's face because he was always turned away. Meanwhile, the agents return to work, and unexpectedly, Dee Gibbons herself comes to the bureau. It turns out she is a religious woman who brings the agents cupcakes and doesn't understand what role she is supposed to play in the global blackout. The agents check Dee Gibbons and find out that on the day of the catastrophe, someone else with the same name used her credit card. Without delay, the agents fly to Utah, where they are met by Sheriff Keeban. During the conversation, the young woman mentions that she, like Dmitri, saw nothing during the blackout, and the guy hopes that it was just a peculiarity of some people. While the agents try to find Dee Gibbons, the bureau studies a strange video. A man who remained conscious was spotted at a baseball stadium. Mark notices an abandoned doll factory, and recalling an image from his vision, suggests checking the building. The agents immediately realize that someone is inside the factory, but they fail to remain unnoticed. An alarm goes off, and hundreds of dolls begin to sing. Mark and Dmitri find the suspect, but they don't see his face. The psychopath utters a strange phrase and throws a lit lighter. Sheriff Keeban dies from shrapnel injuries. Dmitri understands that his fear is not unfounded. He didn't see his future because that day will not come for him. Checking Dee Gibbons' phone yields results. The unknown person called an unidentified guy from the stadium. Hawk tells Dmitri about her vision. The girl saw herself pregnant in an ultrasound room. Following her colleague's advice, she decides to post her vision on the website that the FBI created to collect memories. Noah decides to follow suit. He also posts his information on the Mosaic website, stating that he saw nothing. The guy's inquiry is answered that same evening. An unknown woman calls from a hidden number and says she saw an intelligence report. According to it, the agent will die on March 15th. A maximum security prison in Germany. One of the inmates, Rudolf Geyer, strolls through the yard chatting with a guard about the blackout. That same day, Mark receives a message from the old man. He knows what caused the blackout, but will only tell Agent Benford in person. Dmitri meets Zoe, his fiancée. The girl happily tells him that in her vision she saw their wedding in Hawaii, and the agent begins to hope that he can change his fate. Mark gets permission for a trip to Munich. He meets with the old man, but Geyer promises to reveal the truth only if he is deported to the US and all charges against him are dropped. Dmitri meets the customs officer from Geyer's vision, and he confirms the old man's memories. The old prisoner gets his way. He receives a pardon, but when it comes to his testimony, it turns out that he only knows about the dead crows and that it is somehow connected to the scriptures. Benford hopes that the old man's words will be of some use. He asks Hawk to check all cases of mass bird deaths. The agents manage to find out that a similar incident was recorded in Somalia many years ago. Mark asks to be sent to Somalia, but after the failure in Germany, the agent's request is denied. Then Benford asks Al to contact a former suspect in a hacking case to help him obtain the necessary information. Meanwhile, Dmitri returns to interrogate the girl they were tailing on the day of the blackout. The guy is sure she knows what happened, but she insists that the agents are looking in the wrong place and that Dmitri should hurry, as he has little time left. Despite Olivia's request to transfer Dylan, he is kept in the ward, but she doesn't even suspect that the boy's father, Lloyd, poses a threat not only to her family. Answering a phone call, Lloyd talks to his accomplice, the one who, together with him, caused the worldwide blackout. The agents are attacked. This prompts the CIA to get involved, and all agents are sent for a polygraph test to determine why someone is now trying to eliminate them. After the interrogation, the government convenes a meeting to decide whether to continue funding the Mosaic project. Stan understands that this is the only way to gather enough information, and they must defend their case. The Senate hearings begin at 10:30 p.m., and the floor is given to Agent Benford. Mark starts to falter in his testimony because he hesitates to tell the truth. In his vision, he was drunk. While Mark struggles, his colleagues find something interesting. In satellite images, they find strange towers in Somalia. Hawk immediately informs Mark of the discovery. After a private conversation with the president, Stan finds his subordinates and tells Mark that they have secured funding. Mark calls Janice to share the good news and to warn her that they will soon return from Washington. But at that moment, the agents are attacked for the second time. In the dining car, a passenger notices an attractive fellow traveler, and to get her attention, he starts talking about the blackout. While he tries to charm the beauty, hoping to lure her to his compartment, Janice Hawk is brought to the hospital in critical condition. Learning about the attack, Olivia tries to call her husband, but soon, he personally appears at the hospital with his colleagues. The agents visit the deceased attackers. Examining the bodies, Dimitri finds a mark on one of them, a blue hand. Mark saw the exact same symbol in his memories, and it was somehow connected to the worldwide blackout. Dr. Simon Campos, the charming guy from the train, gets what he wants, and the girl ends up in his bed, but soon she begins to regret it. The stranger tells her that in his vision, he takes someone's life and enjoys it. Lloyd arranges a party for his son and brings him a Halloween costume. But as soon as the man gets distracted, Dylan leaves. The boy gets on the first bus he finds and makes his way to the right address. Dylan enters the Benford house uninvited, calling it his home. Dimitri finds another blue hand, but this time on a road sign. Following the direction indicated, he sees another marker and continues on. The nanny calls Mark and tells him about the little guest. The man is shocked to learn that Charlie knows the boy well, even though she has never met him before. Lloyd arrives at the house and immediately recognizes it as the one from his vision. Mark also instantly understands who this man is, and when Olivia enters the room, everyone feels awkward. The agents arrive at an abandoned house, which is also marked with the blue hand. Breaking in, they find several bodies with their hands smeared in blue paint. Returning his son to the hospital, Lloyd decides to head home for some rest, but in the backseat of his car, an old acquaintance is waiting. Dr. Simon Campos, the pathologist, informs the agents that all the deceased found in the abandoned house had taken their own lives. Agent Fiona Banks arrives from London at the bureau. Her American colleagues brief her on the Blue Hand ghost community. It consists of those who did not see their future, including all the deceased discovered in the abandoned house. Dressed as ordinary guys, the agents head to the ghost club. But to enter, the guests must play Russian roulette. The agents watch in horror, but when the leader of the movement takes the stage, they reveal themselves and arrest him. During interrogation, Dimitri tries to find out who hired the Blue Hand members that attacked Hawk, but Sunderland refuses to answer any questions, fully aware of what lies ahead. In his vision, Agent Goff heard himself talking to a lawyer. Al confessed to the attorney that he was guilty of the death of a woman named Celia. Tormented by these memories, Goff leaves Dimitri a letter and heads to the roof. To change his fate and avoid being responsible for someone's death, he makes a fateful decision. In his final letter, Al gives hope to everyone who saw something terrible in their visions. He assures people that the future can be changed. Simon finds Lloyd at the hospital, and Lloyd tells his accomplice that he wants to make an official statement and reveal the truth to the world, that they were responsible for the global blackout. Meanwhile, Mark takes his wife to the coast for a romantic weekend, but their relaxation is interrupted by a phone call. Benford is informed that a criminal with star tattoos on his hand has been found, the one Mark saw in his vision. Simon proposes a poker game to his accomplice. If he wins, the secret remains a secret, and no one will know about the blackout. If Lloyd wins, the scientists will make an official statement. Simon is confident that luck will be on his side. Hawk is protecting a witness to a crime involving the criminal with the tattoo. At night, Janice requests help from Dimitri and Benford, and Mark recognizes the person from his vision. Not wanting to take any chances, Mark shoots, once again altering fate and killing the suspect. Lloyd bluffs and wins the game. He refuses the money and asks his accomplice to prepare for the announcement. Janice receives an enhanced image of the first suspect and now manages to see the ring on his hand. This could be the first significant lead. Benford tells his wife that he was able to change everything and eliminate the man with the star tattoos on his hand. But at the same time, somewhere, a new plan is being put into motion, involving another individual with the same tattoo. He delivers a suitcase with rings to an unknown old man. Experts manage to identify the alpha symbol on the ring that belonged to the original suspect. However, no one can yet determine its exact meaning. New information emerges. The NSA discovered that several months ago, a suspicious call was made to Dimitri's phone. Dimitri realizes which call is being referred to and demands that he be given the caller's information, the only way he can prevent his own death. Mark finds a message on his wife's phone about his vision. He tries to figure out which of his friends could have betrayed him, but both Aaron and Stan are outraged by Mark's suspicions and deny any involvement. The agents listen to a recording of the call Dimitri received. They managed to determine that the anonymous woman was in Hong Kong. Despite the boss's orders, Mark informs Dimitri that they are flying to Hong Kong. The agents arrive in Hong Kong, where a local colleague is already waiting for them. Stan is furious that his subordinates disobeyed his orders, but Mark risks his job to save his friend. Lloyd addresses the nation with an official statement. He admits that on the day of the catastrophe, they were conducting secret experiments and takes full responsibility. But listening to the scientist's speech, Mark suspects that the real cause may be hidden elsewhere. Stan demands that the scientist be brought to him for questioning. Hawk remembers that Lloyd's son is still in the hospital, and the boss sends her to speak with him. An unexpected event occurs. Simon Campos himself walks into Stan's office. The scientist insists that he disagrees with his colleague and believes that someone else caused the blackout. He agrees to help with the investigation if the agents grant him access to classified information. Hawk meets Lloyd at the hospital and offers him protection in exchange for information, but Lloyd refuses to cooperate and asks to be left alone. The agents try to locate the woman who called Dimitri. To do so, Mark has to break another rule. He threatens the cafe owner who attempted to withhold the necessary information. Stan shows Simon satellite images that revealed strange towers. The scientist admits that the towers are his invention, a laser designed to accelerate plasma formation. Simon can't understand how this is possible. The technology to create them is still in development. But even more surprising is this: he invented the laser in 1992, but the images were taken in 1991. The agents inform Simon about D. Gibbons, who probably created these lasers. The scientist promises to help find the person who stole his idea. Lloyd asks the chief physician to transfer Dylan to a safer clinic, but after the announcement, the scientist loses his credibility and the doctor refuses to help him. Then Olivia intervenes. She promises to do everything she can to ensure the boy's safety. Mark and Dimitri find the cafe where the woman who called is having lunch. She allows the agents to sit down, but admits that she regrets making the call, and that their visit might only make things worse. The woman claims that the shooter who will take Dimitri's life will be Benford. As proof, the stranger provides Mark's gun's serial number. Shocked by what he hears, Mark loses his temper and creates a scene. He takes the woman hostage and exits the restaurant. A local FBI agent arrives, and Mark is forced to back down. While Mark is in serious trouble in Hong Kong, Olivia is bonding with Lloyd. The scientist tells her about parallel universes in which they might have been together once. The agents are sent back to the States, and Mark is stripped of his badge. Meanwhile, D. Gibbons visits the Sears home. Dylan is being prepared for transfer. Lloyd and Olivia bid a warm farewell, but the doctor notices something amiss. The paramedics turn out to be imposters. They open fire on the security detail and, abandoning Dylan, take Lloyd away. Lloyd regains consciousness in a basement, handcuffed. Hawk is tasked with hiding Simon in a safe place where he can continue his work, but those who need him find the agents as soon as they settle into the safe apartment. Dimitri finds Janice unconscious. Meanwhile, Simon is taken to the basement to meet an old friend. The scientists try to understand who and why they were kidnapped, but the answer comes unexpectedly. The same old man who recently received the suitcase with rings arrives in the basement. The kidnapper introduces himself as Flosso. He makes it clear that he won't be gentle, and the hostages should answer his questions precisely. Mark is assigned sessions with a psychotherapist, who helps him recall details from his memories that were previously hidden. Benford remembers that on that night he was talking to Lloyd on the phone. Later, Mark reveals another memory to Aaron. In his conversation with Lloyd, he mentioned a second blackout. Lloyd remains silent, realizing that his revelations could lead to a catastrophe, but Flosso finds a way to make the scientist talk. He has Simon's finger cut off right before Lloyd's eyes. The agents discover where the captive scientists are being held. On the way to the basement, Dimitri calls Janice and asks her to join the operation. Unable to resist any longer, Lloyd tells everything that happened during the experiment, giving Flosso specific details. At that moment, the agents storm the location, but it turns out to be empty. The only thing awaiting the agents is a booby trap. Driving around the city, Mark recalls the map from his visions and realizes where to search for the captives. By this time, Lloyd and Simon are being prepared for execution. The agent crashes into an abandoned store and rescues the scientists. Simon is loaded into an ambulance, but inside, he is met by Flosso. The old man apologizes for the finger and explains that it was to divert suspicion from the boy and to ensure Simon has no desire to rebel. He reminds him that Simon was the initial suspect. Several months earlier, after his father's funeral, unknown individuals took the scientist to a baseball game and ordered him to wear the ring. Thanks to it, he remained conscious while everyone else blacked out. The operation was led by Dee Gibbons. Janice informs Simon that he will be held in custody for some time. The young man stages a spectacle and manages to escape, but not for long. When he arrives in Canada, Hawk is already waiting for him with armed soldiers. Hawk agrees to stay in Canada so that Simon can visit his family. But once again, Simon outsmarts the agent and escapes, despite wearing a special bracelet. Simon heads to a boat owned by an old friend, confident that no one will find him there. However, Hawk beats him to the boat, arriving even before he does. The pair returns to Simon's house, pretending that nothing has happened. The family prepares for dinner, and their Uncle Teddy arrives. Simon opens the door for his relative and is greeted by Flosso. During dinner, a call comes in, and Simon's mother says it's Annabelle, his sister, who left home after the blackout. Flosso prevents Simon from answering the phone and shows him a video. His sister is being held hostage to ensure that Simon doesn't try to escape again. To further demonstrate the seriousness of his intentions, Flosso shows Simon a body in his trunk, the old man from the boat. Fed up with the blackmail, Simon decides to break free. He attacks Flosso and stops his heart. Mark brings Lloyd to his house and asks him to recall everything from his vision. Both men feel uneasy, but the agent knows that this is crucial for his investigation. Dimitri is confident that the Hong Kong woman's prophecy won't come true because he turned in Mark's gun for destruction, but attempts to change the future fail. The gun goes missing. The agents fly to Somalia to inspect the strange structures in person. Simon is part of the expedition, but he is denied a weapon. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Mark informs his boss that he has discovered Dee Gibbons' real name, Dyson Frost, and that somehow he will be connected to Charlie. The team of agents comes under fire. Their guide tries to explain that they are on a humanitarian mission, but this doesn't stop the Somalis who kill the translator. The Somali leader realizes that he's being lied to. He has already seen foreigners arrive and set up the towers many years ago. He locks the visitors up and promises to kill them, one by one. The agents manage to disable the guards and take their weapons. They reach the helicopter, but it's already being looted by locals, forcing the agents to come up with a new plan. The team attacks their opponents but doesn't have time to escape. They are once again confronted by the leader. This time, everyone understands that there will be no chance to fight back. One of the guards, out of fear, reveals the truth about the visitors. Learning that they are FBI agents, the Somali demands a large ransom to help him take over the country. Janice manages to persuade the leader. She convinces him that their mission is not to start a war, but to prevent one. The Somali helps the group reach one of the towers. Simon examines the structure with surprise, noting that it was built exactly according to his design, but long before he developed it. Dimitri discovers a videotape that has been stored in the tower for 18 years. On the tape, the Somali recognizes his fellow tribesman, whom he believed died during the first blackout. The agents also identify the experiment's author. It was Dee Gibbons. Exploring the tower's tunnels, the agents find a sealed room where villagers were imprisoned. Judging by the remains, the experiment's participants were killed. The Somali leader is enraged by what he sees and plans to take revenge on the Americans, but Vogel acts faster, leaving the Somali leader lying with his tribesmen. Dimitri reviews the tape again, and the next few seconds shock him. Dee Gibbons from 1991 addresses him by name. The recording is sent to the department. Mark watches the message left by Gibbons many years ago. Following the criminal's clues, Benford deciphers the chess code and dials the phone number that Gibbons left specifically for the agents. Mark arrives at a chess club to meet someone who could help in the search for the scientist, but the only witness has been killed. Benford realizes that there is someone in the department leaking information. To find out who the traitor is, Agent Vogel gathers everyone in the conference room, and a special team searches the employees' offices. A bug is found on Mark's desk. Everyone with access to the office falls under suspicion, creating tension among the colleagues. The agents are most suspicious of Janice. Recently, she has taken many days off, which she struggles to explain, but she deflects suspicion by accusing Marcy, a colleague with family problems. Dimitri reviews the camera footage and notices a pattern. Marcy was signaling with a coffee cup. Mark looks up at the girl and she understands everything. A shootout ensues in the office. Marcy kills her colleagues and runs outside. Her accomplice arrives on a motorcycle to help her escape, but Janice manages to prevent the getaway. Benford receives a call from Dyson Frost. He offers the agent a personal meeting and promises to call back. Janice and Simon head to the underground parking garage where the girl suddenly stops. She tells the scientist that his signal has been received. Her boss is ready to talk to him. Simon realizes that Marcy was just a distraction. The real traitor has always been Hawk. The police inform the feds that a crime was committed the previous night using the stolen gun. Dimitri catches up with Marcy to find out to whom she passed the gun, but she only says that preventing Dimitri's death is impossible. The agents receive a signal that a criminal with Mark's gun is committing a crime in the city center. Dimitri steps forward, trying to distract the guy and persuade him to release the hostage. As soon as the assailant lowers his guard, Dimitri shoots. Despite the successful outcome, there is no relief. The gun in the attacker's possession has a different serial number. Agent Dimitri prepares for his wedding, trying not to think about the future. But while the bride and guests wait for him at the church, Dee Gibbons attacks him at his home. Mark decides to inform his wife about his missing friend, and while she is on the phone, Dee Gibbons sits down next to Charlie. The agents carefully interrogate Charlie, and the girl describes her conversation with the stranger. She also hands over a picture the old man left her. Mark and his colleagues prepare to visit the address that Dee Gibbons provided with the picture. Meanwhile, Dimitri finds himself at the mercy of a gun, which the villain has attached to a special device. The mad scientist enthusiastically tells his hostage about his inventions and plans. He claims that Dimitri's death is his only chance to save his own life. Benford arrives at the designated location. Finally, a teenager approaches the agent and hands him a backpack with a phone. The agent follows all of the criminal's instructions without question to save his friend. He leaves his colleagues behind and, getting into the prepared car, successfully evades pursuit. Dee Gibbons directs Mark along a highway through the countryside. Constantly checking his watch, the agent continues his journey through the mountains. Finally, he spots Dee Gibbons. The old man raises his gun and orders the agent to handcuff himself. Mark distracts the old man and attacks him. He demands that Gibbons take him to Dimitri, but someone no longer wishes to keep the witness alive. The scientist is eliminated. As he dies, he doesn't have time to tell Mark where Dimitri is. The navigator leads Mark to the last known location of Dee Gibbons. Benford bursts into the building and spots his friend. There are less than 2 minutes left before the automatic shot, and Mark tries to solve the scientist puzzle to stop the mechanism. The timer reaches 0 and the gun fires, but by this time, Mark manages to lift the gun and Dimitri survives. As soon as Dimitri gets out of the chair, water washes away the scientist's map, destroying all the evidence and clues. Mark instructs his colleagues to figure out Frost's blueprints and determine how they are connected to the second blackout, which the mad scientist mentioned. A strange man appears at Olivia's house. He babbles incoherently, claiming that the doctor's husband is Lloyd. Meanwhile, Janice delivers Frost's blueprints to a professor of archaeology, but the people for whom the double agent secretly works demand that she steal the originals and hand them over. Hawk is forced to take a risk. She steals the blueprints from the Institute and sneaks into the office to retrieve the last copy from Mark's desk. Benford catches his colleague red-handed, but she manages to talk her way out by inventing a story about lost documents. Mark asks Hawk to come to the office to meet with the professor. The girl realizes that her deception has been uncovered, but Benford postpones the conversation and returns to his discussion with the scientist. According to the old man, the blueprints that Dee Gibbons had were some kind of device for counting down dates. One of them is October 6th, the day of the blackout. Frost's words keep replaying in Mark's mind, and an idea strikes him. He breaks open the large chess piece hanging on the board. Inside, the agent finds a ring with an unknown symbol. Olivia meets Gabriel, the strange man, again. He keeps repeating random nonsensical words, but finally, the woman manages to discern the main point. The guy has been subjected to multiple blackouts, becoming a victim of Frost's experiments. Experts provide the scientists with the results of analyzing Frost's ring, and Simon makes an astonishing discovery. Inside the ring is a device that allowed its wearer to remain conscious during the blackout. Janice meets with her handlers. After failing the mission with the blueprints, she is given one last chance. This time, she must retrieve the ring from the vault and eliminate Benford. On a city bridge, Simon spots his sister. Annabelle delivers a message to her brother. They need him and the ring. Simon has only 12 hours, or else his sister will be killed. Dimitri arrives at a crime scene and learns that someone has been eliminating all those who managed to survive the predicted date of their death in the last 2 weeks. Simon memorizes the safe's code when Lloyd places the ring inside. As soon as the scientist is left alone, he decides to use this opportunity to save his sister. The agents identify the executioner who has been getting rid of all the survivors. It turns out to be Mr. Slingerland. The agents catch the psycho just as he tries to dispose of another victim, but despite all efforts to save her, an agent accidentally hits the girl. Mark discovers a minivan and Annabelle inside. He informs Simon, but it's already too late. The scientist escapes with the ring. The agents investigate Simon and his alibi for the day of the blackout. Using special software, they establish that he was indeed the prime suspect at the baseball stadium. Olivia brings Gabriel to Mark's office to help find clues. According to the madman, Benford's wall is full of errors, and he forces the agent to redo everything according to his notebook. During interrogation, Gabriel says that Frost wasn't the only leader. There was someone much more important, and he will repeat the blackout very soon. The deranged stranger shows a portrait of this person. It turns out to be the man Simon is currently talking to. Gabriel is set to be transferred to a safe house, and Janice informs her handlers about it. The minivan falls into an ambush, but instead of the strange madman, it's Mark disguised inside. But the agent's operation doesn't end there. He manages to infiltrate the villain's lair and capture the leader. Mark realizes who the traitor in their department is, but Janice still doesn't tell the truth. She claims she was only working for the CIA. Benford begins interrogating the main suspect. He wants to know how the villain caused the global blackout, but the scientist is confident that it doesn't matter. Regardless of how the day unfolds, the outcome will be the same. Benford will be dead by nightfall. Dimitri heads to Janice's house and finds Simon there. Hawk sees no other way out. She helps her partner arrest Simon despite their previous arrangement. Despite warnings, Mark loses control and uses force to find out when the global blackout is planned. Stan realizes that Benford is not in control of himself and orders him to be removed from the office. At 6 in the evening, thousands of people gather in the streets to celebrate April the 29th, the day from the visions. Lloyd arrives at Olivia's house to ensure events unfold correctly, but the woman also decides to change her fate and leaves town with Charlie. Mark's chain of events also changes. He starts a brawl in a bar and ends up in a jail cell. With just over an hour left until the moment of truth, all the characters find themselves in different places, but Stan posts bail for Mark, and everything starts to fall into place. The agents return to the bureau due to a report of planted explosives. At the same time, Lloyd finds Olivia and asks her to return home so they can recreate the evening from their shared memories. The scientist's plan begins to unfold. Dylan writes the formula he saw Lloyd use on the mirror. The FBI building is attacked by masked assailants, but this doesn't stop Mark, and he finds himself in his place at the map with the clues. Simon infiltrates the corporation's server room to hack the computer and prevent another blackout. At the appointed time, Lloyd calls Mark and gives the date of the next blackout, the next 48 hours. Thanks to Gabriel's notebook, Benford learns the exact time. The blackout will happen in 12 minutes. The masked criminals destroy Mark's office and all his work, but the agent survives and tries to fight back. Simon notices that someone has remotely taken control of the program and he cannot stop it. Dimitri suspects the scientist did it on purpose, but Simon swears he is trying to prevent the catastrophe. Mark manages to warn his boss about the next blackout, but he can't get out of the building and is once again surrounded by armed mercenaries. With 30 seconds left before the explosion, Mark runs for the exit, but at that moment, the mechanism activates, and the world freezes again, glimpsing into its future. This is where the series ends. And in February 1959, a group of 9 Soviet tourists went missing in the mountains of the northern Urals. 2 weeks later, their bodies were found at the base of Mount Oturton, which in the language of the indigenous people meant the Mountain of the Dead. The place was named after the leader of the expedition, the Dyatlov Pass. Many years later, American student Holly King became so interested in this case that she decided to gather a new group and go to this mysterious place. The catalyst was a film about an expedition by American scientists who tried to solve the mystery of the Dyatlov group's death but achieved no success. Holly's professor suggested she take up this case for her psychology project, and she invited her friend Jensen to work on it as a film director. They applied for and won a grant. The professor mentioned that she first learned about these events from a novella by Soviet journalist Yarovoy, who soon died in a car accident after the book's release. Jensen suspected that this was how the authorities tried to cover up something terrible. And although people now know a lot about the events of those years, the complete picture remains a mystery. The most common explanation is hypothermic dementia. Although this can happen to those exposed to freezing, In this case, all 9 experienced tourists started undressing at the same time, which is simply impossible. Another frequent explanation is an avalanche. But if they heard the avalanche, why did they sit near the camp for 3 hours without shoes? So there are many answers to this question, one of which involves the secrets of the Russian military, making it seem that the truth will never be known. The first stage of the journey is a flight from Oregon to Chelyabinsk, from where the group will head to the Mountain of the Dead, named by the Mansi people due to a series of unexplained deaths and mysterious disappearances. So the expedition included sound engineer Denise, climber Andy, president of the Northwest Pathfinders Association, who has conquered all the steep peaks in the USA, and his friend Hauser, who spent a whole year conquering the Himalayas. After gathering the group, the guys began to prepare, buying rations, studying maps, and training in the mountains. On January 25th, the team set off. Sometime later, news broke across all U.S. TV channels about the disappearance of 5 Oregon students in the Ural Mountains. Rescuers managed to find their belongings, tents, backpacks, and other equipment. A Russian TV correspondent reported details about the more than strange disappearance of the group of American documentarians, although experts are constructing their versions of the reasons for the disappearance. In winter, the temperature here can drop to -50 degrees, with strong, piercing winds, whose direction constantly changes. This means that if a person walks against the wind and thinks they are walking straight, they might actually be walking in circles. There are speculations about the intervention of some extraterrestrial devices, which many witnesses saw in these places, or even about the appearance of the Yeti. The Mansi elders recall rumbling and fiery balls over these mountains on the days when the Dyatlov group disappeared. They consider these places a portal to the other world. The students wanted to repeat the infamous Dyatlov expedition, and it seems they succeeded. Rescuers managed to find a camera that captured the last days of the documentarians' lives. A group of hackers posted frames on their portal, showing Holly talking about the darkness that followed her from the open door, while Jensen calms the girl, although she is sure they will not get out of this place. The action shifts to a month earlier, when lively and cheerful students are traveling to the Urals. On the train, they are having fun, hoping for success and worldwide fame. Andy is proud of his acquisition, a phone with GPS, which will help them navigate the mountains, while Holly conducts tests to find out people's desire to hike. Soon the group arrives in the town of Evdel, where they plan to interview the only surviving member of the Dyatlov expedition, who left the route due to illness, but now he is held in a psychiatric hospital. However, doctors do not allow the Americans inside, and they only manage to see the old man showing them a note saying, "Leave." In the evening, the group goes to a local bar. The bartender pours them local moonshine and says that the Dyatlov group stopped here in 1959 and drank the same thing as the Americans. There, they meet Sergei, who speaks English and drives them to the village of Visa, the last point before heading out on the road. The man tells them that his aunt, an English teacher, participated in the search for the Dyatlov group. She claims that in 1959, not 9 but 11 bodies were found near the Mountain of the Dead. Next to the last 2, which looked very different from the others, lay some unknown device. But none of this was mentioned in the reports. After the conversation, the guys set off on foot. At night they stop and set up camp, as the weather begins to change. Hauser prepares a camp dinner, and the guys have fun joking with each other. At night, people see strange lights in the sky and recall reports of orange flashes over the Dyatlov camp, but they decide they still won't be able to solve this mystery and go to sleep. However, in the morning, they notice numerous barefoot tracks of unusual sizes around the tents, resembling human ones. The main thing is that the tracks have no beginning or end, as if some creatures did not come to the camp but flew in. Nevertheless, they set off to explore the area. Soon the students find an abandoned meteorological station, around which the same tracks are found, and in the station's booth lies a torn-out human tongue. Denise panics and asks Holly to leave, but Jensen tells her about a pass in China where animals and birds crash into cliffs and people go insane and die. It is said to happen because of the sound of the wind. Holly admits that she had a similar dream. Mountains, snow, and some door with darkness behind it. And then she heard about the Dyatlov Pass and realized that she would find out everything here. During their conversation, the camera captures 2 human figures running far in the background. Later they go further and unexpectedly come to the Dyatlov Pass. Once, 9 people set up camp in this very place, had dinner, and went to sleep. But somewhere between 9 and 11 at night, something that the authorities called an unknown irresistible force forced them to leave the tent in such horror that they cut it from the inside and ran into the night, where it was minus 28 degrees. Holly marks the places where their bodies were found. The first deceased, Rustem Slobodin, Igor Dyatlov, the group's leader and the most experienced tourist. It was probably his idea to leave the tent. Zinaida Kolmogorova was closest to the camp, the only victim who resisted, as her tongue and most of her oral cavity were torn out. Lyudmila Dubinina, Nikolai Thibault Brignol, Alexander Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolevatov. The cause of death for all was called hypothermia, but Rustem and Nikolai had serious skull injuries, and Lyudmila and Alexander had broken ribs, which was not observed in others. There were no signs of an attack on any of the bodies, no external injuries. Something broke the skulls of 2 men and the ribs of 2 people without leaving even bruises. Moreover, Alexander's body had a high level of radiation. But from where, and why only on him? Georgy Krivonashenko and Yuri Doroshenko, when others ran away, sat by the extinguished fire and froze to death. While Holly is conducting research, Andy is surprised that their group somehow covered 22 kilometers in one day. Everyone's watches, GPS, and even the compass stopped working. Some guys suggest leaving the mountains before it's too late, but Holly persuades them to stay and finish the film. At night, Holly notices that the Geiger counter starts signaling, and together with Jensen, they go up the slope, where they find a high but not deadly level of radiation. Unexpectedly, the students discover the entrance to a bunker, closed with an iron door. Holly wants to open it, although Jensen is categorically against it, as Russian authorities did not build it here for nothing, closing something dangerous in the mountain. However, it turns out that the door is open and just a bit frozen. Holly asks Jensen not to tell the others about the discovery to avoid causing panic among the already scared team. They return to the camp and settle for the night. Around 6 a.m., a huge avalanche roars down the mountains, killing Denise, injuring Andy, and sweeping away the tents and almost all supplies. At first, everyone quarrels, trying to find the culprit of the tragedy, but gradually they realize it was an attempt on their expedition. They help Andy and try to contact the outside world somehow. Holly tells them about the bunker, which enrages Hauser since they are freezing here in the snow, while it might be warm there. The students launch a signal flare and wait for help. After some time, 2 people arrive, claiming they saw the flare, but Andy does not believe them, since they have no backpacks and could not have reached here so quickly. He stays to hold them back while the others are ordered to run. The strangers shoot Andy and wound Hauser. Holly, Jensen, and the wounded Hauser barely manage to get into the bunker. The strangers pursue them, but the students close the door. The Americans turn on the lighting, although it is dim and flickering. Running through the tunnels, they find a laboratory full of various devices and documents, among which are old journals with the names of people who died in the line of duty. There are also details about the famous American experiment with the teleportation of the USS Eldridge. Hauser feels unwell and stays put, as Holly promises to find an exit in return for him. The students continue on alone. Soon, Holly and Jensen find the bodies of soldiers who recently died. One of them is missing a tongue, presumably the one they found earlier at the station. But the other bodies are very old and even skeletonized. The 2 open another door, behind which they sense movement. Suddenly, under the flashlight, they see exactly the same camera they have. Moreover, it has their recordings on it. Jensen recalls the teleportation of the Eldridge, which likely happened to them too. At that time, many soldiers mutated, turning into something incomprehensible. At that moment, they hear Hauser's screams and rush to him, finding their friend being torn apart by 2 humanoid mutants. Noticing the newcomers, the mutants attack them. Resembling skeletons covered in skin, the mutants seem to possess the ability to teleport as they appear out of nowhere in any place. Jensen and Holly leave their friend's body, run out of the bunker, and close the door. To their surprise, the mutants do not chase after them. The survivors turn around, and instead of a snowy field, they see a fossil forming a huge round tunnel. The students realize that this is the path for the mutants' teleportation. Holly throws debris inside and sees that the passage is activated. Looking around, the couple finds drawings on the walls made by the local inhabitants and understands that they discovered this place, built by an ancient civilization once living under these mountains. Such portals can be anything, even weapons scattered around the world, which explains many great mysteries. They do not know where it might take them, to which space or time, but Jensen suggests they need to mentally focus on the place they intend to go. and it will work. The only place that they both clearly imagine is the surroundings of their camp near the bunker entrance. They have no choice but to head into the tunnel. The plot shifts back to 1959 when a Soviet girl from the search team finds their bodies and is very surprised because the rescuers have already found all 9 participants of the expedition. Approaching Soviet soldiers take the bodies to the bunker, while one major picks up the Americans' camera, not understanding what it is. The soldier wants to place the Americans with the other bodies, but the major orders them to be placed in a separate room for examination by a doctor. Undressing the deceased, the soldiers are astonished by the unusual clothing for the 1950s. The naked bodies of Holly and Jensen, now looking like mutant bodies, are hung on hooks in a separate cell. The sergeant places the camera under a light. When everyone leaves, the creatures begin to revive. The man lifts his head and looks at the woman. She directs her gaze at the camera, and an angel wing tattoo is visible on the right side of her neck, the same one Holly had. Despite some inconsistencies, the storyline adheres to most known facts, although the American-Russian creative team skillfully handled the mystified legacy of the USSR. However, the found footage effect combined with acting, special effects, and magnificent locations is good enough to ensure the thriller's watchability. The crew of the spaceship is in cryogenic sleep. Astronaut George Taylor is dictating his final report. Exactly half a year ago by the ship's time, they left Cape Canaveral. Over 7 centuries have passed on Earth during this period. The people who sent them on this journey have long since died, but Taylor has no regrets about what they've done. Everything seems different from here. The flow of time is distorted and space is limitless. The only thing he would like to know is whether humanity, the miracle of the universe that sent him into the sky, continues to wage war. A last glance at the clock. It's March 27, 2673 on Earth. He looks at his comrades and lies down in his place. After a while, the ship makes an emergency landing on an unknown planet and finds itself in the middle of a body of water. The crew wakes up and realizes that they have slept much longer than the calculated time. But the most horrifying shock is the death of the only woman, Stuart. At that moment, water begins to enter the ship. They need to evacuate, especially since the samples showed that the atmosphere is suitable for breathing. Looking at the ship's clock, which is frozen at Earth time, November 25, 3978, the crew abandons the sinking ship. Boarding a life raft, the humans sail to shore, marveling at the grandeur of the surrounding nature. There is no sign of intelligent life anywhere. Taylor reminds them that they are 320 light-years from Earth on an unknown planet in the constellation Orion. It is impossible to determine more precisely as no one has had time to look at the instrument readings. Upon landing on the shore, Taylor takes inventory of what they were able to salvage from the ship. A pistol, 20 rounds of ammunition, a first aid kit, and a 3-day supply of food and water. The only question now is how long is a day here? They are discussing the strange death of Stuart, apparently caused by depressurization. It seems they were flying for 18 months, while on Earth it has been about 2,000 years. There is no hope of returning, and time has erased everything they knew. Therefore, they need to start studying this planet. Analysis show that nothing can grow here as there is very little carbon dioxide. But there is nothing dangerous to human health either. They have 72 hours left until they run out of food. Landon sets up a small flag of the United States of America on the shore and the astronauts set off on their journey. The surroundings are strange and wild, bizarre rocks and lifeless canyons. The people almost get trapped under landslides several times. Thunderbolts light up the sky without bringing rain, and the sky itself is covered with clouds with no satellites or landmarks. One thing they know for sure, there's a time gap between them and Earth. Their loved ones died 20 centuries ago. Even if they returned, no one would remember them. Taylor urges his comrades on. Why did they embark on this flight? Was it for fame, new knowledge, or the opportunity to live longer? But now they have lived much longer than any other human on Earth. Only Taylor set out on this journey because he's a dreamer. He is confident that there must be something better than humans in the universe. At that moment, Dodge calls out to them. He has found life. A barely noticeable green shoot has sprouted from rocky desert. This means there are plants here and they need to find them. The group continues forward. Everywhere they look, they see unfriendly rocks, but ahead they see green bushes and some strange crosses that resemble scarecrows. After walking a little further, the astronauts are thrilled to finally see water ahead. The excited group quickly sheds their clothes and jumps in. After that, they swim towards the shore and notice human footprints on the sand. Suddenly, they see dark figures stealing their clothes. The men chase after the thieves, who leave behind obvious traces of their path, such as broken clothing and scraps. Soon they come across their torn clothes and put on whatever remains. Finally, they reach a plain and see many people behaving quite strangely. They are silent and pay no attention to the astronauts, instead calmly gathering and eating different fruits. The Earthlings are puzzled as their fellow humans seem almost feral. Luckily, they are not cannibals. Suddenly, an ominous sound comes from the forest and the people start running. The astronauts try to understand what is happening and suddenly see armed riders. Shots are fired and then monkeys appear on the clearing, apparently hunting the humans. The Earthlings attempt to flee and in the heat of the chase they split up. Shots are heard from all directions and Dodge is killed. Taylor, along with others, runs towards the river, and just when it seems like he's about to make it, one of the monkeys shoots him in the neck, rendering him unconscious. The tied-up astronaut is thrown into a cell with other prisoners. He's surprised to see the monkeys taking pictures as if it's a souvenir. George is brought to a hospital where he's examined by scientist monkeys. They examine Taylor, who's wearing strange clothing. But two chimpanzees argue about the need to study the animal's brains, ignoring Taylor, who's still recovering from his throat wound and unable to speak. In the morning, Dr. Zyra does her rounds. She's intrigued by a strange animal she calls Bright Eyes because he pretends to talk in a hilariously convincing way. Taylor tries to demonstrate that he's intelligent and attempts to snatch the pencil from Zyra's hand. At that moment, Dr. Zaius enters. Zyra shows him the exceptional human, but Zaius is skeptical and sees him merely imitating. Zyra tries to draw attention to the human's uniqueness by highlighting his unconventional use of a blanket as clothing and his unusual hand movements. Perhaps he's intelligent, but Zaius is irritated, dismissing it all as cheap tricks. Humans are dangerous and must be destroyed. Later, they bring a female human as a gift and lock her in Taylor's cell. The next day, George and his companion are walking in the yard in a large cage. Zyra brings her fiancé, an archaeologist named Cornelius, to show him Taylor, but Cornelius sees nothing special about him. While the apes argue, George writes in the sand, but nobody pays attention to him. At that moment, Dr. Zaius arrives, annoyed at Zyra with her human again. Suddenly, a wild man attacks George and a fight breaks out. The guards drag Taylor away and Zaius sees the letters George wrote but quickly erases them. Zyra apologizes to Taylor, but he snatches the paper and pencil and writes his name on the piece of paper. Zyra is astonished and takes him home. Cornelius doesn't believe her stories. It's all just tricks. Humans can't write. They try to figure out where he learned it and Taylor writes the name of his school. The apes are shocked. Could he really be intelligent? The man explains that they came from another planet. Cornelius is puzzled, but flying is impossible. Then Taylor crafts a paper airplane. Afterwards, he asks to see the maps and explains where they landed and how they got there. Zyra and Cornelius argue fervently. She claims that humans are a mutation, the missing link between apes and monkeys, and it is quite possible that monkeys evolved from humans. Dr. Zaius, who enters the scene, discovers the paper airplane, crushes it, and orders the man to be taken to a cell. Taylor and Nova sleep in their cell when the arriving apes order Taylor to be prepared for a castration operation, but the man breaks free and runs out of the cell. He manages to hide in the ape temple but is noticed, and the man has to run through the ape city again. Taylor ends up in a museum where stuffed humans are exhibited. Shocked, he runs out into the street but gets caught in a net, where Zyra finds him. And then the voice returns to Taylor, shocking the apes. Later in the cell, Taylor tries to teach Nova how to speak, but the apes take the girl away and put her in the cell across from him. The man tells her about his life on Earth, but he didn't love anyone there. He wonders if Nova can love. The apes put a collar on him and take him to trial. A hearing is now taking place, and Zyra and Cornelius are ready to act as his attorneys. The judges are outraged. He has no rights because he's not an ape. But then what is he being tried for? The court gives a continuance to his lawyers, but Taylor intends to defend himself. A theologian scientist is called to testify, trying to prove the man's irrationality as he does not know the answers to the simplest questions. But Taylor cannot know them as he has not studied their culture. A person is prohibited from speaking, so he writes his statement and submits it to the court. Cornelius reads that Taylor is a space explorer and arrived from another planet, but the apes do not believe him. They demand to bring the people captured with him. And Taylor sees Landon, but he does not recognize his friend, and the scar is found on his head. George realizes that Dr. Zaius destroyed the man's brain. George is dragged back to the court. And then Cornelius defends Taylor. He did not lie when he said he came from the Forbidden Zone. He described it very accurately, and Cornelius himself was there, and he found traces of ancient ape culture. Zyra continues the defense. If he did not come from another planet, he was born on this one. She found no reason why people cannot speak. The problem is not in anatomy but in the brain, and that is the truth, but nobody wants to listen. Zyra and Cornelius are accused of scientific heresy and the tribunal is closed. The fate of the man is predetermined. He is handed over to Zaius, who intends to perform operations on him. George is outraged. How could such an upside-down civilization arise? And most importantly, why is Zaius so afraid of him? Zyra cannot accept this and organizes the escape of Taylor and Nova. Outside the city, Cornelius meets them with horses and supplies. He suggests returning to the spacecraft landing site. A small caravan sets off and reaches the river. If they follow it, they will reach the sea. Soon they reach the place where Cornelius was excavating. He's ready to take the man to the cave. And then Zyra sees the pursuit. Dr. Zaius, who caught up with the fugitives, is in for an unpleasant surprise. Taylor is armed. The Earthling offers a compromise to the doctor. If Cornelius can prove that their culture is not the oldest and originated from humans, he will leave them alone. Everyone goes into the cave. While Cornelius shows off his findings, Taylor discovers spare parts of a human, a dental plate, glasses, and a heart valve. But the main discovery is a human doll that says the word "Mama." Zaius tries to find a reasonable explanation when gunshots are heard outside. Everyone rushes to the exit. It's the makeshift doctors who, unable to keep their words, have attacked the fugitives' escorts. Taylor takes Dr. Zaius hostage and orders everyone to leave. Taylor will release him in exchange for a horse, food, and water for him and his woman. But before leaving, he asks the doctor why he always feared him, and he answers because he's a man, and that his ancestors are to blame for the lifeless Forbidden Lands, for he is the lowest and most treacherous beast. The people leave, and the doctor orders the cave to be blown up and Zyra and Cornelius to be arrested. He saves the future of his people. Taylor and Nova ride along the beach. Suddenly, the man jumps off the horse in horror. He has returned, and they did it after all. They blew them all up and destroyed civilization, let them burn in hell. Nova looks at Taylor in fear. She doesn't understand what is before her. The upper part of the Statue of Liberty rising on the ocean shore. The film is based on the book by French writer Pierre Boulle, who considered his novel one of his least successful works and therefore had serious doubts about its success on the big screen. But in the end, the film ranked 350th on Empire magazine's list of the 500 greatest films.